That was the amount of fuel was so significant that, of course, would only have accelerated the flames once it did crash into the tower, because it was going from Boston to Los Angeles and was clearly so heavily fueled up. The second explosion that I witnessed when I was outside was basically the collapsing of the second tower. And again, it was a huge thump, a huge noise, and there were crowds everywhere on Wall Street and on Broadway running from the explosion. I as well went under the building that is across the street from the New York Stock Exchange, and I basically stayed there with about 20 people. We were just staying in a stairwell across the street from the exchange. We couldn't open our eyes. We were all having a hard time breathing because the air is so thick with this debris and smoke all around us. So again, the scene is very much the way it was about an hour ago. It's very dark. Now, the shot that you're looking at right now is obviously a shot from afar, so you see the smoke and you see the collapsing of the towers. But when you're in the thick of it on Wall Street, it's very dark. It's very cloudy. I can tell you that people who work at the New York Stock Exchange, I am being told, are safe. So if any families are looking for any employees, they are safe, and they are looking for places to hide or secure places away from the trade center.
Maria, earlier we were seeing feeds from MSNBC where they were evacuating the west side of lower Manhattan there. I don't know if you've been outside or not, but can you tell us a little further east there of where the Trade Center complex is, what the scene is like outside? Yes,
I've been outside. I basically, as I mentioned, the sites outside are very dark, very cloudy. Above us, there seem to be clouds.
Are there still a lot of people outside?
No,
is what I'm wondering. Yeah.
No, there's no one outside. The whole area has been cleared away by security. Particularly outside the New York Stock Exchange, there's no one. And what there is very, very thick.
What you're hearing, Maria, is tape of the tower collapsing earlier this morning.
Yes, I see that. And at that time, that is when I was outside hearing that as well, when I ran under the building. But right now, it's clearly quieter, and there's very, very thick pieces of dust and white smoke everywhere. The smoke seems to be moving still above us over Wall Street streets.
Maria, I don't want to interrupt you. Scott has some news on casualties at this point.
I do. This is from the Associated Press. A police official speaking on the condition of anonymity says a number of Trade Center casualties are still unknown, but could certainly be in the thousands. And we've seen also New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani say that he expects massive casualties. You would expect nothing less, obviously, in a tragedy like this.
Obviously, and we have all of our people on the ground and covering the story. Bill, I think we're going to go to David, right?
David Faber has been working the phones trying to get a hold of people who work in that area. David?
Yeah, Bill, very hard to get through to a number of people, but the people I have spoken to are concerned mainly for their friends. We all know that we must know people who are in those buildings, in the surrounding area, given the...
and the cell phones are dead. You can't get a hold of it.
It's
so if
very
you're trying
hard
to get a hold of your loved ones in Manhattan by cell phone, it's not possible.
It's very difficult,
worrisome.
and of course, people in the community of Wall Street are all worrying about anybody who was there that they have a relationship with, including, of course, so many of us who know so many people who work in those buildings and the surrounding buildings. I've heard some horrific stories, unfortunately, about Cantor Fitzgerald, the large bond trading firm that has offices in one of the towers, or had offices in one of the towers between the 90th and 102nd floor. They were calling people were calling saying, "Are you all right?" after the plane hit, and they were told, "Yeah, we got to get out, we've got to get out." But the question is, of course, how quickly can you descend 100 flights of stairs in between the second plane hitting the second tower and the ultimate collapse? So a lot of concern, as you might expect, of course, amongst everybody, and certainly given the concentration of Wall Street-related people and employees down there, Sue and Bill. There's
I drive past that every day.
Great concern.
On the way to the NYSE.
Exactly.
No, it's amazing. Is that area is so condensed. Of course, it's very difficult to get people out of there.
You live in that area, do you not, Scott?
I do. I live down in the Hanover Square area, and it's very condensed. The streets are narrow, and there's a lot of sharp turns in and out of the financial district, so it's difficult to get people out of there in a quick and orderly fashion. And of course, the subways that do go down there were shut down. So how do you get out of that area, the surrounding area from the trade centers and, east and west of the tip of Manhattan?
We're starting to see global reaction, as we mentioned, to this. Air Canada is on the wires.
Yes, well, they are
suspending all their
flights there in Canada, as all flights in Canada are being suspended. As it happens, the highest Federal Reserve officials are in Basel, Switzerland, where they were attending a conference there, including Fed Chairman Greenspan and including Bill McDonough, who runs the Fed's New York City District office, and he is saying, as Fed officials always do when there is a crisis of sorts, that the Fed will provide liquidity as needed. So we should let the people know that that is being announced by the Federal Reserve at this point as well.
Also on the Associated Press,
absolutely,
out of Cleveland, Scott?
Well, we were talking earlier. There was some misinformation. First, American Airlines had reported that these two planes were carrying a total of 156 passengers. Then it was reported that there was a total of 164. We're going back to 156, and that's directly from American Airlines officials. Just wanted to clarify that and make sure we had the right number there.
That will probably be the norm for the day, where we get bits and pieces of information, some of which will be accurate and some won't.
The Associated Press out of Cleveland is quoting Mayor Michael White of Cleveland as saying a Boeing 767 out of Boston has made an emergency landing at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport because of concerns it may have a bomb aboard. That, according to the Associated Press, quoting Mayor Michael White of Cleveland. We will continue to follow that part of the story for you.
Just to recap, we're kind of watching the pictures as you are and trying to discern from officials themselves who are themselves trying to get organized right now exactly what is going on, not only in New York City area as they continue to evacuate the lower portion of Manhattan. You saw NBC's Pat Dawson and Ashley Banfield in that portion down there in the financial district as they were being moved north on the possibility that there were so-called secondary devices or bombs located in some of the buildings down there. And in Washington, where they have evacuated essentially all of the government offices in downtown Washington, D.C. and moved government officials to safe areas. I'm so glad to be able to say that we have the Wall Street Journal's John Bussey on the phone. We have been concerned about your well-being, John. Tell us what's going on and what you've been through, pal.
Yeah, just cut me off when you want to. I was getting ready to talk with Haynes during Squawk Box, and the fire was raging in both buildings. I looked up at the south building, the second World Trade Center to be hit, and explosions were coming down the building. It looked as if charges had been set on each floor and they were in succession going off. Now, this was probably not what was happening. It just looked that way to me. The building just blew out floor by floor, and it probably had something to do with the structural damage that was done by the plane hitting it. When I saw the floor-by-floor explosions happening, I dove out of the office where I was because the windows looked directly over the World Trade Center. We are in the World Financial Center, directly across West Street from the two trade centers. By the time I came up from under a desk where I sought shelter, the entire floor, the entire room where I was completely dense with cement and smoke. You could not see. I felt my way along the wall and desk by desk until I found an opening. I made several mistakes, and I thought to myself that this must be what it was like in the World Trade Center, the smoke and the dust so dense that you couldn't breathe. I got out, and on the ground, I went down the emergency stairwell. Our building had been evacuated. Down on the ground level, there was a couple of inches of dust and debris. It looked like Pompeii after a volcanic eruption with just debris, smoke, and dust in the air, but also all over the ground and coating everything. The EMS and firefighters were in disarray. They were trying to find their colleagues because they, of course, were out in the street when the first building collapsed, as were several people who had been evacuated from the building, though I think those people had been moved away toward the water by that point, in which case they would have been safe. We took shelter in a restaurant that a firefighter broke the glass through. About a half a dozen of us, including EMS people, We then started handing out water to EMS people who were coming back from the area of the World Trade Center. One of the EMS people gave me one of these surgical masks. It was critical if you were to attempt to breathe in the area. By the time that I began to sort of move toward the water, toward Liberty Street, the second building came down. Everybody began running. We ran for shelter around the corner of a apartment complex directly across from the World Trade Center, next to the World Financial Center. The EMS person and the firefighters that I was with, about a half a dozen, we all slammed ourselves up against a wall that was actually corrugated tin. It looked like some kind of a driveway that was part of the apartment building to avoid all of the debris that was raining down out of the sky. The next thing that happened, and we were so close to the building that you could feel it hitting your shoulder as it rained down. But we were on the safe side of the building, much safer than where the firefighters were on the other side of the building, exposed directly to the explosion. What came next was almost worse. The sky completely was dark. It was dense with smoke and dense with dust and cement dust. And we were just stuck. We crouched there next to the building with our hands on each other's shoulders. One of the firefighters took charge, yelled out if everybody was okay. We sounded off, saying we were. He was telling us how to breathe through our masks, telling us to put cloth over our face. This was probably what was going on all around the World Trade Center building, where there were many firefighters out in the open when this thing came down. As time went on, enough of the smoke cleared that one of the firefighters was up with a flashlight, radioing to our group. He made his way over to us and led us, because you couldn't open your eyes. It was stinging with smoke and dust. You could barely breathe. He led us single file. We were blinded with our hands on each other's shoulders into a building where we waited until the dust settled. I then went outside and made my way down south near the water in Manhattan to where boats have begun to pull up in a small marina next to some restaurants between Battery Park and the World Trade Center. These are now beginning to ferry people from Manhattan across to New Jersey, where I am now. I am at Harborside, directly across on the island. But there were precious few people waiting there in line to be ferried away. They may have been evacuated north. They may have been evacuated in the other direction from the World Trade Center. But by the time I got down to the tip of the island, or actually not quite to the tip, it's short of that, there were not that many people waiting to be evacuated, and I hopped on a private boat, came over here to the Path train station on the New Jersey side. All the phones are down, but I got a line through to you all.
John, and we cannot tell you how thrilled we are. You were one person we were very concerned about. Can you give us a sense of how many people were on this same route? I mean, how many evacuation routes are there, and are they being, jammed at this point?
I'm not sure how to put this in words, but you can only imagine. It is chaos. I got to also say, without trying to sound, dramatic about this, that the professionalism of the EMS and the firefighters was there throughout. They're basically in an environment where two enormous buildings have crashed to the ground. Many of their colleagues were caught in this in some way. Just before I left the building, I reported to Mark Haynes there were people leaping out of the the
John,
building.
we have to interrupt you because we are going to go now live to a news conference which concerns the situation.
I have no information on the United flight right now.
With the airlines. I believe this is a United Airlines spokesperson at Logan Airport.
Again, I'm not familiar with the particular flight patterns they may have filed.
Was it a non-stop flight to Los Angeles?
I believe it was.
At what time, sir, were the flights stopped in Logan? You know?
At
what time? What time was the airport shut down?
I believe we shut the airport down to arriving flights somewhere around 9:15, and departing flights shortly after that.
What happened to the flights that were in the air? Where are they?
They were diverted to other airports.
How long will the airport be shut? How long will it?
Again, we're going to assess all the measures that we've taken. We want to, obviously, the safety and security of anyone who works here at the airport, any of our passengers, is a top priority.
Do you have a lot of baggage that hasn't been claimed, or are you allowing people to claim their baggage at this point?
That's an airline decision, yes.
Do you know who's responsible for this? Do You know where the plane came from?
I do not.
Joe, can you explain what's going to be going
in the terminal, in American Airlines terminal, for checking those passengers?
Well, security.
Is that Passport or is that the American Airlines?
Security. It's a collaborative effort. We work with airlines. We work with the FAA and Massport. We all collaborate on different aspects of the security.
Who's going to be at the Hilton?
For passengers who are coming to the airport, passengers who may have questions about...
We're going to ask all passengers coming to the airport to stop, get to a phone, call the airline, and get the information from the airline on their flight schedules.
Joe, can you tell us who's going to be at the Hilton? Who is going to be at the Hilton greeting the families? What do you have set up there for them?
Massport has developed a family assistance center that will hopefully meet the emotional needs of the family members until the airline can step forward and provide those services. We have an interim plan that we've put together to make sure the family's needs are met in this time.
Specifically, what services are you offering? When will that be open?
Family Center is open right now. We are receiving families into that center.
And what is there?
How many families have arrived?
What?
We have counselors, we have specially trained people to assist those families.
An official there at Logan Airport in Boston, where at least one of the jets involved in the attack on the World Trade Center buildings earlier this morning was hijacked from Boston. It was en route to Los Angeles. And some insight on that, one of our reporters, Jane Wells in Los Angeles, points out that the jets so far involved today, there have been 4 that we know of, are either Boeing 757s or 767s. They essentially have the same control system, so anyone who might commandeer those jets would only need to learn the same control system in order to fly those jets. And again, we've heard of only 4 at this point, but we're waiting for more word.
Scott, you have some more news.
I do. I just wanted to make clear earlier when we were giving the information about the 4 airplanes involved in this. One was United Airlines flight number 175. We had no information at the time, of course. We understand that was a 767 from Boston to Los Angeles, set to arrive at 12:33 local time in Los Angeles. I think what you take from this is we're looking at 4 large airlines, all headed from the eastern coast of the United States out west, perhaps in the minds of terrorists to take big planes with as many people as possible heading on long flights involved in this.
Well, we don't want to speculate about anything, of course. We should also note that in Florida, they have decided to close Disney World and all the other 4 theme parks, which of course attract an awful lot of people on a daily basis. All of those are closed. We will have no trading here in the United States. The SEC has closed trading, and as a matter of fact, we didn't even get trading open in New York, obviously because of the disaster there. We should note that they have been trading in the United Kingdom, and UK stocks have suffered their biggest one-day point fall since October of 1987. The dollar is dropping against the yen. It is well below the 119 level against the yen, and it is now down almost 2%. The bond market was trading earlier, and we did see a flight to quality into the bond market a bit earlier.
It was trading sharply higher, as you might imagine, as a kind of a flight to quality there. Hampton Pearson back in from Washington now with some more details. Hampton?
Bill, a couple updates on basically the air traffic situation here in the nation's capital. The Washington Airport Authority announcing a short while ago that both Dulles and Reagan National Airports are now closed and will be closed for at least the next 24 hours. These are the 2 major airports, of course, serving the nation's capital that on an annualized basis have in the neighborhood of about 2.5 million passengers per year. We don't know the status of BWI, the Baltimore Airport, the other major airports serving the greater Washington, D.C. area. Of course, the main concentration here has been on the Pentagon, where it is reported that basically a 3rd plane involved in what appears to be this terrorist attack that began in New York crashed into the heliport area section of the Pentagon and into the building itself. There has been a full-scale evacuation of the Pentagon. On any given day, there's anywhere from 25 to 30,000 civilian and military personnel inside that building. We have very scattered reports of at least 24 injured victims being treated at various Virginia hospitals. Obviously, very preliminary information very early on as far as what's going on across the Potomac River at the Pentagon itself. As you've been reporting, basically all federal buildings here in the Washington, D.C. area have been shut down. The White House, the Capitol, the Treasury, the State Department, all being evacuated. also, we are told that as people prepare to leave the nation's capital, some of the traffic patterns have been changed where certain major arteries to D.C. are now one-way out of the nation's capital. We, of course, awaiting the return of President Bush from Florida and an update from the White House on its view of all of this. That's what we have for you here from Washington for the time being.
Thanks, Hampton. Hampton Pearson there in Washington. On the phone is Harold Brooks, who represents the Red Cross. He happens to be based in San Francisco, but we'd like to get a little insight, Mr. Brooks, into what the Red Cross may be doing and, in fact, what the Red Cross may need at this point in the areas around New York City and in Washington right now.
Well, the American Red Cross is responding to the incident in Washington, D.C. and New York City, and our chapters and volunteers are working with the emergency management teams to ensure that help is being provided. Mm-hmm. You know, people who will be experiencing tremendous stress from the lack of warning and the unfamiliarity of this kind of an event. It's just such a gruesome sort of a thing. The shock is going to cause people to want to do something. The fact that it was done by human hands makes it all the worse. The best thing for folks to do, and we would encourage you to get out the word, that people who are in the affected areas contact their family members from outside of the area because it's difficult to call in. Now, Red Cross has a 48-hour moratorium on what we call disaster welfare inquiries, so it's going to be important for people who are in those areas to contact folks because everybody wants to know if they're okay. Red Cross has mental health workers who will be working very carefully and sensitively with members of the affected families and others who are impacted by this.
Would it make sense, Mr. Brooks,
for quite a while?
Would it make sense for people in the outlying areas, if provisions are needed, to contact their local Red Cross offices to see if they can help?
That would be absolutely correct.
Mr. Brooks, thank you. Harold Brooks, who represents the American Red Cross based in San Francisco there.
We're going to go back now to the Wall Street Journal's John Bussey. And John, I know, first of all, I want to say I'm very glad you're safe because I was very worried about you. It was great to hear your voice on the phone. Tell us what's going on now, what you see, and where you are.
I'm across the river from Manhattan now in New Jersey, just right on the waterfront. They're ferrying people across in private boats, in Park Service boats, and police boats. I just came across about 25 minutes ago. As I was crossing, it looks very much as it does in your cameras, smoke completely engulfing a many square block area. When after the second building came down, what was basically happening was that the remaining emergency services personnel and firefighters were trying to organize their command centers. It was, as you could imagine, utter chaos. Some command centers as well, right next to the building. This was the North Tower. The South Tower, there were not as many fire trucks next to it. But presumably when the North Tower did come down, a lot of those fire trucks were immediately affected. So the firefighters were trying to find where their command structure was. There were people in the streets who had been injured, and this is about maybe 3 city blocks, or maybe even further, 5 city blocks away from the tower, but essentially out in the open, because that section of Manhattan is not cheek by jowl construction like you have in downtown Manhattan. So when the dust cloud went up, it basically had a lot of room to maneuver. Soon people were gravitating toward the water because the breeze from the river was what finally cleared the dust and the smoke out of the area. For about 4, 5, 6 minutes after the towers came down, longer, probably about 8 minutes, you could not see your hand stretched in front of you. As time went on, this began to clear, but the smoke and the dust are still quite intense around the area as more debris continues to fall. So people are gravitating down toward this boat marina, but there aren't that many. It should be noted, though, that my building, the Wall Street Journal, which also houses Oppenheimer, had been evacuated. The other World Trade Center buildings were being evacuated, or World Financial Center buildings right across from the trade centers were being evacuated. When I went down the stairwell, there was nobody else in the building. So those people who have friends and relatives there presumably those people got out. There may have been some people left back into the building, but I just did not see them. But this evacuation process had been well underway for about 40 minutes before the buildings fell.
All right, John, thanks. Yeoman's duty there, pal. John Bussey of the Wall Street Journal, who is now across the river, essentially getting something of the same view that we're showing right here via camera. He's in a different part across the Hudson River from the Manhattan skyline, but that's about what he's getting right now. Back to Hampton Pearson in Washington with more on the Federal Reserve and their response to all of this.
Well, Bill, we've had two important pieces of information from the Federal Reserve. We are being told, first of all, the Federal Reserve is saying that the system is open and operating. The discount window is available to meet liquidity needs, and that the Federal Reserve is standing by, very much prepared to provide money to the U.S. banking system in the aftermath of these terrorist attacks. Also, we're getting information on the whereabouts of Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan. It turns out he is out of the country attending a conference in Basel, Switzerland, and we are told that the Fed chairman is safe. Back to you.
Thank you, Hampton. Let me give you a little sense here, because we are, of course, saying that the SEC has closed trading of all the U.S. financial markets today. The chairman of the New York Board of Trade, which is a backup futures exchange out on Long Island, it's in Long Island City in New York, said he does not expect to reopen trade until Monday at the earliest. And let me tell you why. The banking system must be back up to speed, he points out, and clearing members. You know, it takes a trade between two traders, the buyer and the seller, but then the trade must be cleared beyond that as well. And clearing operations must be back up and functioning in order for trading to resume. So it is the best guesstimate of Charles Falk, the chairman of the New York Board of Trade, this backup futures system, that they probably won't see trading resumed, at least normal trading, until Monday at the earliest. This is preliminarily from this one piece, but this may be what the SEC officials are thinking about as well.
And Bill, Alina Cho is back with us, and Alina, United Airlines is making some statements right now.
Yes, what we're hearing across the wire, Sue, is that United says it is, quote, deeply concerned about a second flight. This is a Boeing 767 headed from Boston to Los Angeles. We want to remind you that we have already given you this flight number. We believe it is United Flight 175. It is the only one of 4 flights that has been unaccounted for. You'll recall that American's Flight 11 and 77, both en route to Los Angeles,
Alina, look at your alert.
Crashed into the...
Alina.
United Airlines is confirming that a second United plane is crashing. The location has not been given. This is a Chicago dateline.
On Associated Press.
On Associated Press.
Where United Airlines would be based in.
Right.
And they have shut down their system nationwide and worldwide, actually. But there were a number of flights that were in air when the terrorist attack began, and if you are just joining us, that was at just about 9 a.m., a little before 9 a.m. So there were a number of flights that were in the air at the time, and all the major airlines have been scrambling to account for those particular flights. AMR, one of them, United Airlines, one of them, of course. And United is now saying that they are very concerned about that particular flight, the last one that Alina just mentioned, and they are saying now that it has crashed, but they are not giving a location on that. Bill?
We do, I mean, the 4 we do have accounted for. One was out of Boston, headed for Los Angeles. That is, we believe, one of the jets that crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. Another coming from Newark, New Jersey, headed to San Francisco. That one we know was a flight that crashed outside Pittsburgh. What we don't know is the other 2 flights, one that crashed into the Pentagon earlier this morning, and the second flight that went into the second World Trade Center tower, where those flights originated right now. But as we've been saying, the FAA, we are told, according to various news reports, still have not accounted for what has been termed several flights. We don't want to be speculative, we don't want to be reactionary, but we are just saying that in the normal course of operations, that is probably going to be the case anyway, as they try and account for all of the flights. And you can imagine at any given moment during a normal day of business how many flights will be in the air around the United States, and indeed in North America. So that as they try to account for each of those flights, they are scrambling to figure out where all of them are.
And there is a brief recap of exactly what has happened so far today. As Bill mentioned, 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center. One into the North Tower, one into the South Tower. Both of the Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan in the financial district have collapsed. The Pentagon in Washington has been attacked. Parts of the Pentagon, according to the Associated Press, have collapsed as well. Alina, you have some late-breaking news, too. There's a live shot of Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon.
This is as of about 20 minutes ago, Sue, but I'm not sure if we pass this along. I don't want to alarm anyone, but at the same time, NBC News is reporting, according to a White House aide, that he has tried to reach officials close to President Bush, and White House signal operators said they were still trying to reach the president on Air Force One. You will recall, if you've been watching along with us, that the president cut short a trip to Florida. He was there pushing his education plan. He learned of this tragedy while he was reading to children at an elementary school in Sarasota. He promptly left that venue and shortly thereafter made a statement condemning the attacks, of course.
And all the federal buildings in Washington have been evacuated as well.
Right, and so just to put this in perspective, just to compare, the worst terrorist attack ever before today was the Air India 747 bombing over the Irish Sea in 1985, which killed 329 people. We are not getting clear numbers and may not for some time.
Nor will we for a while.
On these tragedies in Washington and New York. Just so you know, on any given day, according to a local city official in New York, the World Trade Center on a workday, both buildings might hold around 10,000 people. The capacity is about 50,000. You can only imagine the type of news we're going to be hearing in the coming days.
It is going to be very difficult, obviously.
On the telephone, we have Neil Livingstone, who's the chairman and CEO of a group called Global Options, which is a crisis management organization that goes into action at times like this. Mr. Livingstone, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Some perspective from your point of view. You've been in this business an awfully long time. No one has seen anything quite like this.
Well, this is the nightmare that we have exercised against and worried about for literally 2 decades, and it's finally come to pass. But our major fear was a multiplicity of attacks against a multiplicity of targets in multiple cities that would and particularly if they were very high consequence or symbolic targets, and that's exactly what we've seen today.
We don't want to be speculative too soon, but this obviously had to be a very, very well-coordinated attack.
Very well coordinated and very expensive, and we also have to presume that even the pilots of those aircraft, if they had a gun to their head, still probably would not have flown those aircraft into the World Trade Center. They would have done something else. And so we have to presume that probably they even had trained pilots flying those aircraft at this point after they had seized them. So this is a very highly skilled and coordinated attack. There are only a small number of groups or countries in the world that probably could carry out such attacks, and obviously U.S. intelligence is mobilized right now and law enforcement authorities to turn over every rock in the world and look at every source trying to figure out if we can identify those culprits.
Intelligence groups here in the U.S. that must feel very, very upset and devastated by this and not having seen it coming.
Well, we had so many threats in recent years. We had one last week against our embassy and our military posts in Japan and Korea, and nothing, of course, happened. We have so many warnings these days that they've blended into the background noise. Our problem is, and we've always believed this for many years, is that you cannot stop these attacks at the water's edge. You have to go to where the terrorists live and to the governments that sponsor them or give them safe haven. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to deal with this, because we live in an open society, and unfortunately, an open society is a very vulnerable society.
Neil, if no one claims responsibility for this particular attack, and given the fact that obviously it has taken the United States unawares, are we going to be able to find out who did this?
I think we're going to be able to find out. I suspect that we may already have strong indications who carried it out. A lot of time, our problem with intelligence material is assessing it in real time. Sometimes when we know what to look for, we can go back and look at it and see if it makes more sense. We have a lot of culprits in this case. We'll be able to look at the manifests of the aircraft. We'll be able to look at when they entered the country and on what passports and so on. presuming that they are foreign nationals as opposed to domestic nationals. And all of those things may start pointing in several directions very conclusively.
Neil, I understand that your wife either works at the Pentagon or was at the Pentagon this morning.
My wife is Undersecretary of the Navy. She was at the Pentagon.
She is all right?
She's all right. She called from the parking lot. She has an office on the E ring, which is the outer ring of the Pentagon where the windows are, and obviously we know that the plane went into the side, but fortunately she was in the bowels of the Pentagon giving a speech at that time.
Did she tell you what it was like? Did she just...
No, I've not talked to her directly. Cellular phone traffic was totally out of commission in Washington, and she spoke with my office as I was caught in traffic at the time that this occurred, and simply indicated that she was all right and would be back in touch with me when she could.
David Faber, you have a question?
Yeah, Neil, it's not a stretch to say that the magnitude of these attacks surpassed that of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. How do you respond to something like this, which certainly would be an act of war if, in fact, another nation were committing it?
Well, it's even an act of war if a group has carried out this attack and has some sponsorship by a country. I mean, you have to remember that we don't know that this is Osama bin Laden, but he's protected by the Taliban government in Afghanistan and has already carried out other attacks against us. And we've done nothing or precious little to try to deal with that problem. This is probably of greater consequence to the United States in some ways than Pearl Harbor, in other ways not. But I think every American, just as my parents' generation remembered where they were when they heard the news of Pearl Harbor, I think this is going to traumatize the American public the same way, and it calls for a very drastic response by the United States.
What happens to intelligence services here in the United States, indeed security services here in the United States? We had another securities expert earlier who said, you know, in a free society there is only so much you can do and still maintain a free society.
Well, it depends, I think, right now on whether there are further attacks, and as to how far we go in basically taking extraordinary steps to protect the security of Americans on a temporary basis. But obviously, Americans all over the world are feeling threatened right now. Our bases and our military is on the highest stage of alert. After all, the very heart of our military, the Pentagon, has been attacked. And so as a consequence, we're on a wartime footing now already, and nothing would surprise me given the gravity of the situation. It isn't to say that we want to see civil liberties suspended or anything, but you can bet that extraordinary steps will be taken by law enforcement agencies, by the intelligence community, by the military, and by our political leadership right now.
Neil, thank you. Neil Livingstone, the CEO of Global Options, a terrorist crisis management group. They're based in Washington.
Bill, in fact, as you might expect, world reaction is coming in, local reaction. You know, David Faber referred to this being similar to Pearl Harbor. In fact, Senator Chuck Hagel, Republican from Nebraska, called it the second Pearl Harbor. Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien said the attacks on the U.S. were both cowardly and evil. We also want to mention that there are several government houses, government offices, rather, that were housed in the World Trade Center, among them the U.S. Customs Office, the New York Secret Service, the U.S. Treasury Department, U.S. Secret Service, U.S. Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. In addition, of course, as Mark Haynes had mentioned earlier this morning, all of the rescue personnel who were in there, firefighters, police officers, and the people who work there from day to day.
And we should note that in the World Trade Center, some of the Wall Street offices that are located there include Morgan Stanley, Credit Suisse, First Boston Group, Commerce Bank, and Deutsche Bank, among others. Maria Bartiromo, I think we're going to
back to the New York Stock Exchange, where, just a reminder, it goes without saying, there is no trading today, either there or anywhere in the United States, as far as the financial markets go. Maria?
Yes, thank you, Bill and Sue. You know, I would only remind you, because you guys have been comparing this to Pearl Harbor, and it's funny because we were talking about this earlier with some people down here, and you know, one comment that I keep getting from people is the fact that in Pearl Harbor, that was a military base that was attacked, whereas this is a civilian area. So many civilians were impacted, so this is being looked at as much worse than the Pearl Harbor attack. So I just would point that out to you. Here, the scene on Wall Street clearly is somber. I walked outside a little while ago. There are dust, white dust, this thick on the floor of debris and smoke just settling after the explosions. I mentioned to you earlier in the coverage that I myself witnessed 2 of the explosions. The first one that I witnessed was when the second plane went into the second tower, and truly it was out of a movie, this plane going right in, putting a hole into the second tower. The second thing that I myself witnessed was the further collapse of one of the towers, and there was a huge bang down on Wall Street. Everyone ran for their lives. Outside, the scene right now is quiet. There is no one around. People have looked for places for security, places to hide away from this. The mood down here, we're waiting to find out any fatalities. Clearly, so many people who work in the downtown area have friends and family in the 2 towers. I'm told that there were 13,000 people in each tower. We're still waiting on the actual count. So again, I'm here on Wall Street, and people are mulling about. No trading today, obviously. We're waiting to find out more news, and as we wait, people are just sort of outside mulling about, but there's not a lot of people outside. It's dark. The clouds continue to move above us.
Thank you very much, Maria. We'll continue to get back to you throughout the day. Maria Bartiromo with the NYSE. Bill?
Michelle Cruza-Cabrera has been spending time trying to put all this in perspective and to kind of pull it all together to give us an assessment of what's happened today so far. Michelle?
Yeah, this is just basically a recap here, Bill. A series of terrorist attacks allegedly took down the Twin Towers and forced the evacuation of dozens of buildings from New York to Washington and across the United States. You can see the video here. The attacks happened around 9 a.m. when an American Airlines plane reportedly hijacked from Boston crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. About 18 minutes later, a second plane collided into the South Tower. Moments later, the South Tower collapsed, followed by the North Tower. It was a scene of terror as people were seen falling and jumping from the tower, according to reports from people that we have on the ground there. American Airlines has confirmed 2 of their flights were hijacked and crashed in today's attacks. 164 passengers and crew members were killed. And United Airlines confirms a Boeing 757 from Newark to San Francisco has crashed in western Pennsylvania. 90 people were on board that flight. No word if this was related to a terrorist attack officially. Explosions also rocked the Pentagon and State Department. The White House has been evacuated, the Capitol has also been evacuated, and the congressional leadership has been taken to a secure location. Federal government offices in Washington are closed. All U.S. embassies and consulates have been notified to take adequate precautions. And meanwhile, all securities markets in the U.S. are closed today following the attacks. Evacuations were ordered at the United Nations, the Sears Tower in Chicago, the Space Needle in Seattle, skyscrapers in Boston, Cleveland, and Minneapolis. All flights in the U.S. have been canceled, and all international flights have been diverted to Canada. In Manhattan, all bridges and tunnels into the city are shut down. Several subway lines have also been suspended. And then there was crossing the wires earlier, Sue and Bill. Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan is in Switzerland. He was there for a previously scheduled meeting of the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, and his travel plans are being kept highly secret at the moment.
And we should note that Israeli airspace has now been closed to all foreign aircraft as well. And also the border between California and Mexico has been closed after the East Coast attacks, according to Mexican government officials.
Also, Sue, in a rare joint statement, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle and Minority Leader Trent Lott has issued the following statement, and I'm quoting here: "We are outraged at this cowardly attack on the people of the United States. Our heartfelt prayers are with the victims and their families, and we stand strongly united behind the President as our Commander-in-Chief. We will work with him to ensure that the full resources of the United States government are brought to bear to protect the American people and punish the perpetrators of these unconscionable acts. May God bless America." Some other things. Michelle had mentioned some closures. Kennedy Space Center is closed. Los Angeles Airport is closed. Yankee Stadium is closed. Major League Baseball has suspended operations. Those are some of the things that we have learned. Also, White House, U.S. officials have been moved into protected facilities, according to NBC News. The Secret Service has set up in various buildings what what they are calling so-called hard rooms with their own communications and their own ventilation system to protect individuals. There are several in the White House complex. President Bush, we want to remind you, cut short his trip to Florida and is en route back to Washington.
Thank you, Alina Cho. You and I are going to step aside here.
That's right, but we're going to go down to Hampton.
Tyler Matheson and Martha McCallum will be here in just a few moments. But let's get back to Washington. Hampton Pearson with more details there as well. Hampton?
Well, Bill and Sue, in addition to what Alina was just talking about as far as the, number one, the statements from the top congressional leadership, as well as beginning scattered reports on the whereabouts of top Bush administration officials, we also do have a statement from SEC Chairman Harvey Pitt, basically saying that the Commission has been and is in constant communication with each of the organized securities markets exchanges as a safety precaution while the tragic events of today are being sorted out. The securities markets have decided not to open for trading today. SEC Chairman Harvey Pitt saying, we strongly support that decision. It's the responsible course of action to take in light of today's tragedies. And investors, by the way, Mr. Pitt is saying, should be assured that the disruption to normal trading patterns is a temporary phenomena. Trading will resume as soon as it is possible and practicable to do so. Now, also, there is beginning to be a scenario, if you will, to more or less account for the 4 hijacked airliners involved in this terrorist attack. First, of course, there was the American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to LAX. That is the one that is believed to have struck the South Tower of the World Trade Center. It had 81 passengers and a crew of 11. Then there was American Flight 77, Washington Dulles, LAX. That is more or less the one at this time that is a unconfirmed hit at the Pentagon, causing the chaos there. Then, of course, we had United Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco. That also a 757. That is believed to be the plane that has crashed in western Pennsylvania with 38 passengers on board, 2 pilots and 5 flight attendants. Now, there is also United Flight 175, another Boeing 767, Boston to LAX bound. This, it is believed, is possibly the plane that crashed into the World Trade Center North Tower. Again, unconfirmed, but the most likely scenario at this point, accounting for the 4 planes that we do know were at least hijacked, triggering the whole chain of events that have led to this massive apparent terrorist attack here in New York City. Excuse me, in New York City, and of course, with a ripple effect here as well in the nation's capital and, frankly, throughout the world. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Hampton Pearson, just seeing additional news that the Canada-U.S. border is to be closed. That, according to a news source, the U.S. border with Mexico has also been closed by the United States. And welcome to our continuing coverage here at 24 minutes past noon in the East. I'm Tyler Matheson, joined by Martha McCallum. As we see there, the continuing aftermath of this day that the United States was attacked. As a reference point, some 2,403 Americans perished at Pearl Harbor. No guesstimate yet, no idea yet about how many Americans were lost today, but certainly that number will be high.
Tyler, there is something, this is Alina Cho here, there's something coming in that Hampton Pearson may not have seen as he was giving his report from Washington. This is some congressional reaction coming in to NBC News. There are F-16s flying over the Washington, D.C. area right now. The congressional leadership is being secured. Only House Speaker Dennis Hastert has been taken to a secured, secret location. All of the other members of Congress have been instructed to go to their homes in D.C. At this time, there are no plans for any members to evacuate the Washington area. So we wanted to pass that along to you as well.
Martha McCallum, just to remind everyone, these 2 buildings, of course, are the gateway to Lower Manhattan and to the financial district, where so many of the friends and family of people who live in the New York area make their living, and they are all, you know, very on edge at this moment. Many of them have been able to make some contact with their family members, but many have not, and many are waiting. We should mention that Morgan Stanley has established an emergency contact number, which we can also put up on the screen when we can do that, 888 1-888-4391 is Morgan Stanley's emergency contact number. I'll say that again for you, 1-888-4391. There it is on our screen. That is the number that Morgan Stanley is giving out. As I said, you know, there were ferries that did manage to leave the city. Some of the people that I spoke to who are traders on Wall Street this morning were able to get on ferries. The ferries then shut down for a time being, but now we know that John Bussey did take one of these ferries over to Jersey City. Lots of people have been finding places to stay, apartments of friends that they are in right now. And so everyone is sort of trying to get some sort of stability in the city and try to begin to assess the situation, which is still very much ongoing. Tyler?
Well, that is exactly right. Of course, at the World Trade Center, among the offices there, those at least some installations of Morgan Stanley, Cantor Fitzgerald, Credit Suisse Group, Commerce Bank, and Deutsche Bank, as well as numerous state and federal offices, including those of the Customs Service, among others, and certainly some of the trading in the commodities trading areas there. We've heard that Chairman Greenspan of the Federal Reserve is not at the Federal Reserve Building in Washington. We do not know exactly where he is or whether he is among the federal officials who have been taken to secure sites either in the Washington, D.C. area or elsewhere. We do know, as Alina Cho just said, that Speaker Hastert, who is in line in the line of succession to the presidency, has been taken to a secure location. Third in line, Tom. Third in line to the White House. Of course, the president and the vice president. And President Bush was in Florida this morning, is evidently either on his way back or we do not know exactly where he is. The White House will not say, but they do say that the president is safe. Major League Baseball, as you may well have heard, canceling all of its games for tonight, and certainly there will be other such cancellations on this day that the world changed forever.
Tyler, Martha had mentioned a contact number for, was it Morgan Stanley? I want to pass along a phone number, and maybe the control room can listen along as I give that number. American Airlines has set up a hotline for family members. You'll recall that 2 American Airlines flights crashed into the World Trade Center buildings this morning. That number is 1-800-245-0999. Again, that number is 1-800-245-0999. Just to give you an idea of the sheer horror, one of the planes that went down, the United Airlines plane, one of them, the one that went down outside Pittsburgh, WPXI is reporting, and this was passed along to NBC News, that the 911 center received a phone call from the cell phone from that plane saying the plane was hijacked. The man talked about an explosion and a cloud of white smoke. Then the line went dead. That, of course, according, as I mentioned, to WPXI, a live report there. Another thing that we're just getting across the wires right now, and I may be stating the obvious, but according to the Associated Press, high-ranking city police official says the number of people killed or injured could be in the thousands. I had mentioned the World Trade Centers can hold about 50,000 people on any given workday. One city official had said more than likely around 10,000 people would be in the 2 buildings. I want to remind you as well that those first 2 planes that hit the North and South World Trade Center towers hit them about 18 minutes apart. I believe the North Tower was hit first, and so it is possible that many people in the South Tower were able to be evacuated, though of course at this early hour it's unclear how many.
Okay, we want to mention that we are joined on the phone right now by a gentleman named Brian Taylor, who is a market historian who has some expertise in the area of assessing what kind of effect these kind of tragedies, and clearly we may never have witnessed a tragedy of this magnitude in this country, and so it's difficult to make comparisons, but certainly during World War I and World War II, there were periods that were devastating for the markets as well. Brian, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Give me your reaction to all of this morning.
Well, it's just horrible. All you can do is feel sorry for the people and the families who were involved in this and hope that we can prevent something like this from ever happening again.
In prior times, how have financial markets responded? What have they done? Obviously, there's not been an attack at the heart of the financial center in New York ever before.
No, there hasn't. But in similar crises such as World War I and World War II, initially the market would decline and then bounce back very quickly after people had taken into consideration what had happened. Now, during World War I, the markets were actually closed from August until December of 1914, although some trading did occur off the exchanges, and that led to them reopening it. Now, in London during World War I, the market was closed, as it was in other continental centers, and then in 1939, they did close the London market for a couple weeks before reopening. But in both cases, they tried to get things back to normal as quickly as they could, and they did do so.
You know, this morning the New York Stock Exchange sort of initially, before it was determined what the explosion was, it looked like they were thinking about delaying the opening. And of course, it would be the wish of, in the light of a terrorist attack, to try to maintain some order, to try to make it appear that that these markets would not be closed so easily, that it would take quite a blow to impact the U.S. financial markets, which is you know, the global center of the financial markets. But clearly, the devastation and the sheer magnitude and the growing national nature of these attacks was more than anyone could expect to continue to trade during.
Oh, I think that's definitely true. I really don't think they had a choice in that matter. The only question is how quickly they can get the markets back open. I'm sure they'll try to do that as soon as they can.
Brian, we're going to ask you to stay on the line if you can. We want to bring in Ron and Sana, who is with us from Midtown. And Ron, we are very happy to have you with us and to know that you are okay. Please tell us what your experience was this morning.
Well, I was heading down after we had learned of it about 9 o'clock or 8:55 this morning. I had called in to see if we should go down and aid the coverage, and I was on my way down. And we got fairly close to the building, and I ran into a cameraman from MSNBC, and we were trying to get across town past the World Trade Center to the West Side Highway, which is on the lower southwestern corner of Manhattan, to hook up with our colleagues from CNBC. And as we were going across one of the restricted zones, the building started to explode, I guess is the only way I could describe it. It was hard to tell if it was an actual explosion, but the building began to come down, and we ran, and I sprinted around a corner. John headed straight down the street, and it began to look like a scene out of Independence Day, with just blackness raining down everywhere. And as I cut around the corner, I ducked behind a car, and it got darker and darker. I got inside what was just a parked car and stayed there for several minutes, and the material continued to rain down, and it was literally pitch black, darker than night, for several minutes. And as it began to clear modestly, I made my way out and headed to a building which was occupied by a few people, and there was a light that was shining from the inside. And so went in there, and there were a couple of police officers and a few other people, and we made our way out in what looked like, from all the movies that we've seen growing up, the aftermath of a nuclear explosion. There was gray debris over the entire area. It would, the sky, the air around us was still filled with soot and ash and other debris. And we made our way to a police car, and the police picked up a couple of injured people as well as we made our way up the East Side Highway and eventually got to Midtown Manhattan. But it was truly a harrowing experience, and not nearly, obviously, as harrowing as others had suffered, but it was an unbelievable event in many ways, almost surreal.
How close were you, Ron, to the Trade Center when this happened? What did you hear, and what did your feet feel?
Fear, mostly. We heard that. I wouldn't call it an explosion. We did notice that the building began to blow at the top, and that material began to come down, and we just turned and ran as soon as we saw that. We were probably within a couple of blocks, maybe a block. It's hard to tell, but we were close to the base, but we were looking up at the top, and as we turned to run, material just began to fall, and like that scene in Independence Day where wind was just whipping down the street in the wake of an explosion, that's exactly what we experienced. And it went down the street, curved around corners, and blew with a fair degree of intensity, again, Tyler, until the sky was completely black.
Ron, I'm curious about what your thoughts are in terms of the global economic impact of all of this. You've watched these markets for many years, and this is a truly devastating event. What do you think where do we go from here?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. I believe, you know, the interesting, I shouldn't say interesting, but what these attacks obviously were designed to maximize impact, not just in terms of loss of life and political terms, but in economic terms as well. At the very least, 1/3 of this nation's financial transactions are routed through New York. This will disrupt the economy in a way I assume we can't fully appreciate yet. Not to mention the massive rebuilding costs that will take place here, to an extent in Washington and Pittsburgh and any other area that's been attacked so far. And it will create, no doubt, a great debate about globalization. The question now, does the United States turn inward, not just politically, as it strikes outward against its foes, but also, does this freeze the expansion in global trade or even contract it? Does it affect world markets in a way that we can't understand? Certainly, as Brian Taylor was saying, there is a precedent for the market shutting down for an extended period of time. As he pointed out in World War I, there was a 6-month freeze in trading activity. One would assume that the next several days will not witness much financial activity in New York or anywhere else in this country. And it comes at a time, of course, where the American economy was weakening as well. So again, the attacks will have a maximum impact, not just on loss of life, not just politically, but economically as well.
Ron, let's let you catch a breath there and talk to our producers while we go back to Brian Taylor, market historian in Los Angeles, by phone. Mr. Taylor, you just heard what Ron Insana said. Would you like to elaborate on that? What might be the long-term effects of this, both on global economies and on the American and the world's financial system's ability to function in the next weeks?
Well, I think that clearly with the questions about globalization, which have been raised in the recent past at the meetings of the G8 and others, that certainly has become an issue. But I think that we should use this as a sort of rallying point to make sure that we do keep the world open and not allow these individuals to make everyone in the world worse off. That in the long run, more trade, more integration of economies benefits everyone in the world, and we just have to keep that in mind. And just as we would allow the terrorists to undermine the military and political aspects of the country and other countries, we can't allow them to do that to the economy either.
Brian, you know, we're getting word that like the power trading activity, you know, commodities trading, every form of trading in this country is not happening, and indeed in many of the markets around the world as well, and that in some areas we may not see trading for another week. And of course, this is an ongoing, developing situation. Still, we have no idea what the devastation will be when all of this finally settles down. What kind of impact do you think that having the markets closed, now that we have become so dependent on the almost 24-hour-a-day nature of trading of everything from power to commodities to equities to bonds, will mean to our economy?
Well, I mean, the trading of the commodities and the other transactions are a means to an end to support the financial system throughout the world. I think that the overall impact would be minor. It would be short-term. But I hope and believe that within a week, things will be back online. People will be trading again. And, you know, the impact will, I believe, be minimal. Now, he talked about the rebuilding, the changes that are going to take place as a result of this. Those are going to be real impacts. This, you know, could affect the financial and economic conditions within the United States, obviously. But I would think that the impact would be minimal. You still have the rest of the world producing goods, generating goods, carrying out transactions, and I think that will continue.
Brian Taylor in Los Angeles, thank you very much for joining us today. Brian Taylor, a market historian. Let's go back to Ron Insana, who I assume, are you at 30 Rock in Manhattan?
Yes, this was probably the closest place I could get to, given that the bridges and tunnels to New Jersey are all closed now. So I made my way over here. I think I'm going to disagree a little bit with Brian Taylor on his assessment of the situation. and I assume we can't see even at CNBC headquarters how the price of some commodities like gold are currently faring at this particular time. But in periods of crisis like this, investors, to the extent that they are able, very frequently flee to hard goods, whether it is gold or oil or platinum or something of that ilk. One might be in the process of buying those, not as a recommendation. I'm saying this is what people might do overseas or may begin to do once the markets open here. We're in the midst of one of the greatest bear markets in modern times, and one has to wonder whether or not at this point consumer psychology, investor psychology will be affected to such a degree that they will be reluctant to invest in financial assets. I'm not sure that we could say comfortably yet that the effects of this will be minimum in financial or economic terms. One never knows how these things play out in the financial markets. Not to say that anything severe will happen, but I think one has to think this through very carefully to determine just exactly what the financial ramifications are. This is obviously not a simple event. As we said, it was designed to maximize its impact, not just in terms of politics or loss of life, but also in economic terms, taking out the financial infrastructure of this country. And as you know, Tyler and Martha, in the World Trade Center, there are a host of commodity trading firms. There are, in fact, commodity exchanges located there. There are numerous brokerage firms and financial firms that exist. And you know, it is difficult at this point in time to easily calculate what the effects will be. I think we're going to have to step back several days, if not weeks, before we can make that determination.
Ron, we thank you very much for joining us. It's great to see you. We're happy to see that you're safe there at 30 Rock, and we'll join you again in a Barksdale. Thank you,
Ron. Thanks, Martha.
Martha, there were a couple of things that I wanted to pass along to our viewers. President Bush is at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. He is to make a statement momentarily. We, of course, are watching that for you as well. Washington, D.C. Mayor Anthony Williams is due to make a statement at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That is less than 20 minutes from now. Something else that we're learning from the FAA, from NBC News, that 22 international flights are currently in the air and will land in the United States. No problems reported with any of these planes. They were originally diverted to Canada, but the latest update is that the 22 international flights will be allowed to land in the U.S. No points of origin or destination are given just yet, but a couple of pieces of information that we wanted to watch, the most important of which, arguably, is that the president is safe in Shreveport, Louisiana at Barksdale Air Force Base. He will be making a statement shortly, as you see there on your screen.
And we also hear, Alina, that according to the FAA, only 50 aircraft are still up in U.S. airspace, and there are no problems reported with those aircraft at this hour.
We also want to add that George Bush, the President of the United States, says that they have taken steps to ensure the functioning of the U.S. government. So clearly, Washington is trying to send out the message that they are taking very intense and severe actions to protect the American people, that they are going on to ensure the functioning of the U.S. government, and that things are proceeding as smoothly as could be expected in the middle of this very difficult time.
And let's take you back several hours and bring you up to date for those of you who are perhaps just joining us. Two aircraft crashed into the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. Apparently, these aircraft were commandeered by terrorists in one way or another. Both of the Twin Towers hit, one shortly before 9 a.m. Eastern Time, the other about 18 minutes later. Sometime after that, within another 45 or 50 minutes, first one and then the other of the Twin Towers went down. The Pentagon was also attacked.
You know, Tyler, I'm just thinking we live in such a media-centered society, and it is, you know, somewhat interesting, if you can call it that all of these attacks sort of happened, you know, several 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour apart. And we were, the country, able to witness these events on national television, and the impact of that is not to be underestimated.
Our Robert Hager of NBC News reported earlier, and I believe it has been confirmed by American Airlines, that the flights involved were American Airlines number 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. It is believed that that is one of the aircraft that hit the World Trade Center. American Airlines number 77 from Washington to Los Angeles with 64 on board It is believed, according to Robert Hager, that that was the aircraft that hit the Pentagon. United Airlines 93, Newark to San Francisco. This plane went down apparently also in some part of this concerted and coordinated terrorist attack somewhere south of Pittsburgh. And United Airlines Boston to Los Angeles flight number 175 also confirmed down. And Hager of NBC News reported earlier that that was the second flight that hit, the second aircraft that hit the World Trade Center.
We want to give you that number, that Morgan Stanley number once again, because they are making an effort to make sure that families have a number to call to get some information. They do, as we told you, have offices in those World Trade Center towers. 888-883-4391 is the Morgan Stanley emergency number for those of you out there who may have loved ones with that firm and who are trying to get some information.
United Airlines has also posted an emergency number, and there it is for families concerned about their loved ones, 1-800-932-8855. That is for those people affected on United Airlines. And American Airlines also has one, 1-800-245-0999. The Red Cross is also putting out requests for blood, and for those who want to donate, whether in the New York area, the Washington area, the Pittsburgh area, or elsewhere, the Red Cross is obviously in need of blood donations. And, of course, Americans respond to those kinds of requests as well.
In fact, Tyler, at just one New York hospital, St. Vincent's, we're getting some numbers here. Lines of people are showing up to donate blood, as you might expect. Here are some of the first numbers that we are getting in from this one hospital, St. Vincent's. 184 patients total, 10 of them critical. Patient information line for St. Vincent's is 212-604-7285. Patient information line, again, for St. Vincent's Hospital in New York, 212-604-7285. Again, 184 patients total there, according to a spokesperson at St. Vincent's, 10 of them critical. If you are at all concerned about loved ones, you should, and think that they might be at St. Vincent's, you might want to try that number there.
Okay, Alina, thank you very much. Let's head over to Leslie LaRoche, who is standing by with the latest on what is happening in Europe. Leslie.
Thank you very much, Martha. We did have, in response to those attacks in the United States, we did have some security measures here taken here in Europe. Some of those were to evacuate Canary Wharf here in London. We thought earlier that Heathrow had been evacuated. That was not the case. Heathrow and the London airports are all open, but security certainly has been stepped up. We've been hearing from leaders around Europe about deep condolences to the people of the United States and blasting terrorism and its grip on the United States right now. In the markets, we did call around and talk to some traders and to some of the floor brokers, asking them for their reaction. Many of them said that they could not talk right now, many of these folks here in London, because they had not yet heard if their colleagues who work at the World Trade Center, whether they were alive or what the condition was of their colleagues. So we couldn't get a lot of comment, except we got a lot of sadness. In the markets, now they stayed open through the day. The FTSE closed down 5.7% lower after the attacks over in Paris. The CAC dropped 7%. The DAX is still trading. It is still open for business for another hour or so. It's down 8% right now. It was down 11%, technically in a crash territory, but up off of those lows right now. We do know that the London and the German markets will be open for regular trade tomorrow when they do reopen for business. Let's see. Take a look at some of the other reaction in the markets. They've been most profound in the oil markets. The front month futures had been up $3. That's 10%. We are off of those highs right now, and we are hearing from the OPEC secretary saying that OPEC will not withhold oil in light of these attacks. We're also hearing from the OPEC secretary saying that OPEC is committed to meeting world demand. We do have trading in the front month up just $1.55 on the oil contract. These attacks are also playing out in the foreign exchange markets, where we are seeing the dollar tumble to 7-month lows against sterling, against the Swiss franc. It is down 2% against the euro, and it is below 119 against the yen to last trade at 118. We have also seen
quite substantial selling in the insurance sector here in Europe and also in the airlines. The likes of British Airways down 21%, Air France down 16%, but there has been offset slightly with some buying in the oil sector. The likes of British Petroleum closed almost 5% higher. We will keep you up to date with what we know from Europe. Back to you, Martha and Tyler.
Okay, thank you very much, Leslie LaRoche in London. We reported earlier that several borders had been secured in the United States, the Canadian-U.S. border. Now the U.S. Embassy in Ottawa is saying that the U.S. border is in fact open between Canada and the United States, and obviously a heightened security would be in place there as well. More cancellations are beginning to come in, athletic events, community events, including the start of the PGA Tour event on Thursday, for what that is worth. Fed Chairman Greenspan is in Europe and is safe, apparently, on a trip. The Treasury Secretary, Paul O'Neill, has canceled a visit planned for Tokyo. The Secretary of State has cut short a visit in Latin America and has gone to a military airport in Lima on his way now back to the United States. That was a meeting of Latin American secretaries of state, foreign ministers, and the like. And as Leslie Roche just said, OPEC has said that OPEC will not withhold oil and will ensure the free flow of that commodity worldwide.
Tyler, United Airlines, this is a flash just coming in. According to Reuters, United Airlines, which confirmed that, earlier that 2 of its flights did in fact crash, now has a total of number of people aboard, 110 people aboard those 2 United flights. 2 American flights crashed. Those 2 crashed into the World Trade Center buildings, as you're looking at, I believe now this is the 2nd flight that went into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. There were 164 passengers and crew aboard those 2 flights. So if you do the quick math there, that is what, 274 people aboard those 4 flights, 2 United, 2 American.
Okay, we want to go down to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange where Maria Bartiromo is standing by, and it seems everyone has cleared out. Maria.
Yes, Martha, indeed. Earlier today, there were a lot of people here standing around. It was a secure area. There have been an increasing number of people who have now walked again outside. I was outside a little while ago. It almost looks like there's snow on the ground. There are piles and really just a thick sheet of dust, white dust from the explosion. The shot that you're looking at right now, of course, is from afar, but when you're in the thick of it on Wall Street, which we all are, and you really do feel it. It's basically almost dark out. I mean, it's very cloudy. It's very, very gloomy out there. Now, earlier today, I was on Wall Street on Broadway, and I was watching the 2nd tower and the 2nd plane go into that tower. At that point, there was a huge explosion noise. Everyone on Broadway, frankly, ran for their lives, including myself. We ran away from the building. I actually found a hiding spot across the street from the New York Stock Exchange underneath a building. There was a little stairwell that myself and about 20 people just gathered around. We couldn't open our eyes because there was such debris and dust all around us. I was basically full of soot, and it's still on my shoes and my pants. I walked outside a little while ago, and there remains a very, very dark cloud that seems to be continuing to move above us and keeping this very, very dim scene going outside. Now, there are more people who went outside, but most people are wearing white masks because they don't want to breathe in this terrible smoke that is surrounding the area. All of the offices on Wall Street, or certainly all of the offices around the Twin Towers, have now been evacuated. I mean, the large major brokerage firms like the Merrill Lynch's, as well as Lehman Brothers, the Goldman Sachs's, have all been evacuated. People are trying to get home. I will tell you that the city is basically standstill. I mean, there's nowhere to go as trains have been suspended, and as you've been talking about, the flights have been suspended. There was an opportunity earlier to get home on a ferry if you needed to. That has also been suspended at this point. And earlier, if you could believe this, there was people falling out of the building. We're not sure if they were jumping out of the building, if they were falling out of the building, but there were witnesses that I spoke with earlier on Broadway that told me that they were watching buildings fall out of the Twin Towers. I mentioned earlier that I saw the plane go into the second tower. Then about 15 minutes later, I went back outside thinking that it was safe again, and lo and behold, I witnessed the third explosion, which of course was the sound of the tower collapsing. And at that time, when I heard the tower collapsing, again, it was a huge thump and explosion noise. You're looking at the scene right now, and that's what we were all watching. The building collapsed. We all ran for our lives. Metal and papers and debris were flying at us in the face, and that's when I ran for cover under the building across the street from the New York Stock Exchange. On a positive note, I can tell you that if there are any families out there wondering if your family is okay, if they have jobs at the New York Stock Exchange, I am being told that there have been no injuries or attacks, rather fatalities at the New York Stock Exchange, although I will say that people were handing out wet towels earlier so that we all could cover our faces. And again, there's no one in the area that I am right now, but there certainly are people mulling about on the floor of the exchange. The exchange is asking all of us to stay on the bottom or in secure places around this area.
Tyler here, to that point, who is left at the New York Stock Exchange? It does not, from those shots that we're seeing, appear that there's anybody on the trading floor other than you. Who's left, and where did the people go, and how quickly did they get out?
Well, there are people. It has been very organized here. Earlier, Dick Grasso got up on the podium, the chairman of the exchange, and he basically directed people, look, if you want to go home, leave, don't walk west. Of course, west of here are the Twin Towers. He was recommending people walk east. The only option is to walk if you want to go anywhere. And then he got back on the podium and said it's best to just stay put. So there are people here. They're just not in the shot right here, and they're mulling about. But anyone who was here, we have word across the city that ferries to Staten Island are running now. Here we go. Staten Island ferries are running. That, you just heard Dick Grasso speaking on the podium, and he is basically saying that the Staten Island ferries are running at this point. So there is an attempt to get people home and in safe places wherever they may be. The ferries are now running again.
Okay, Maria, thank you very much, and we are, of course, delighted that you are safe and on the job there at the New York Stock Exchange. Andy, where do you want to go next? Do we have a battle plan here?
Tyler, I can mention very quickly that we were expecting a statement from President Bush from Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. He has made that statement. That tape is en route to us. We don't have that tape yet, but I can tell you what he said. Quote, freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. That from President Bush moments ago in Shreveport, Louisiana. That tape is making its way to us.
All righty. There are also reports that some of the U.S. naval battle groups have been moved into safer positions in the area of Norfolk, Washington, D.C., and New York. Some shots are showing us on other feeds are showing us U.S. naval craft around the New York harbor area, whether they are being moved out or not. Whether they're being moved out of the New York area or into, we do not know, but certainly there is naval activity around the foot of Manhattan at this hour.
We do have President Bush saying on the wires that the military is on high alert status, and we are hearing that there are some indications of that. Just echoing back to what Maria was saying this morning on the floor of the stock exchange, it was my understanding from traders that I spoke to down there that they were initially told to stay put, that they felt that was the safest place to be. Some of them did then leave the building because they were afraid, because the New York Stock Exchange, of course, is another center of commerce, and they felt somewhat vulnerable. But as Maria has told us, the area there has been protected. The reports from the New York Stock Exchange are that no one that worked in that building has has been injured. I know that many of the traders found some refuge across the street at one of the health clubs across the street. I spoke to one of them who was on the phone there, and he just talked about just the sheer terror that was felt on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange this morning as all of this started to happen, the shaking and sort of the movement of the building when these explosions started to occur, that people then ran outside, that many of them did witness, as Maria did, this second plane, and as most of the world did, I imagine, on national television and around the world, that second plane hitting the southern World Trade Center tower. So it has been a very, very devastating morning on Wall Street, and many of those people are just sort of starting to tell their stories to us over the phone.
And we do have confirmation that the commander of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet has sent Navy ships to the New York and Washington, D.C. areas now to assist with air defense and medical needs. He did not identify the ships or specify how many are involved, would not disclose details about this deployment, but apparently naval vessels either in or on their way imminently to the New York and Washington, D.C. areas. Washington, of course, New York is a deep international harbor. Washington, D.C. is 50 or 75 miles up the Potomac from the Chesapeake Bay, and the Potomac at that area cannot take the biggest naval vessels. Sharon Epperson joins us now with some further reportage and first-hand eyewitness accounts. Sharon.
Well, Tyler, I left here a little after 9 a.m. trying to get into New York City. Of course, by that time, all of the bridges and the tunnels and everything had been closed by that point. And so we made our way down, following the river toward Edgewater and West New York. We talked to a number of people who were on the piers there looking, who had seen the entire scenario unfold. Let's hear what one of them had to say.
I heard on the news that a plane had hit one of the towers, so we came down here to see what was going on. Standing here, and we witnessed another plane hit this, looked like the second tower, about halfway up, maybe a little bit more than halfway up, and we just saw a great big ball of flames. It was terrible. I've never seen anything like it.
At that point, a lot of folks were watching, and they noticed that the first tower actually collapsed. That gentleman noticed that, as well as many others who were visiting. One man we spoke to was visiting from Australia, had come to visit a friend from Australia, has been here only a few weeks, and this is what he saw when he noticed that it was exploding.
I just saw the very end of the World Trade Center when the last bit of it actually collapsed, and then when it hit the ground, there was just a massive puff of white smoke that was there, and that's when I grabbed the binoculars and had a good look, and I knew that the left-hand side of the trade center had collapsed, and there was just the huge puff of white smoke. It was just unbelievable.
At that point, he said he was trying to figure out, exactly how it had fallen down. I asked him, did it fall over? Did it fall inside? And he was describing to me a little bit about how exactly he watched this unfold. Take a listen.
Just to the left of the tower, of the one that's still standing, the left of that, and when it hit the ground, you could not see, there's a couple of smaller buildings underneath that, and you could not see those buildings after it hit the ground. It was just, the white puff of smoke was just that huge.
We tried to make our way down, further down toward Jersey City, trying to take a ferry across, at least to try to get to Lower Manhattan. Again, the ferries were taking people from Lower Manhattan into New Jersey, but were not going the other way. We stopped there at West New York. As we were making our way down River Road, we actually heard on the radio that the second tower had collapsed. We did not get to see that, but when we got to West New York, many people were there. This is in Edgewater before it had collapsed. Many people then coming down to see what had happened in West New York, looking at the second tower that had exploded, that had imploded actually. And take a listen to what one of the gentlemen we spoke to said when he saw that happen.
It looked like the fire was about 20 stories below the roof of the World Trade Center, and then it just gradually started expanding and expanding. We came out here with binoculars, and about a half an hour later, we saw a huge chunk of the building, one of the World Trade Centers, fall to the ground, and just smoke everywhere. All of downtown was covered in smoke.
Now, you've heard people talking about how Lower Manhattan is at a standstill and that you can't get around. You really cannot get around this part of New Jersey very easily either. They have actually stopped traffic into Fort Lee, New Jersey for the most part, which is where CNBC is headquartered. The traffic in Jersey is very slow, very difficult to get certain places. Again, they're advising everyone who is at home to stay home because they're having a difficult time maneuvering all of the traffic. A lot of people trying to get to vantage points where they can see what's happening, but causing a lot of congestion there, Tyler.
Sharon Epperson, thank you very much. The enormity of this tragedy just sort of beginning to be calculated and felt here. I must say that about 10 in the morning I walked out on the streets of Fort Lee, and one could actually smell in the air the smoke, the unmistakable aroma of airline fuel and of this inferno that had traveled some 10 to 15 miles up the Hudson as the winds carried this wind of war back across this side of the river.
It's just truly unbelievable to look at these pictures where there is no longer two World Trade Center towers. I mean, any of us who, you know, spend a lot of time in this area, this is, or around the world, I mean, this is the view of Manhattan, which has now been altered forever.
It was, of course, the home of 1,200 businesses there in the World Trade Center. 50,000 people work there. An estimated 90,000 visitors scale it every day to see the commanding views there from lower Manhattan. Of course, in February of 1993, the World Trade Center was also attacked from within by terrorists who moved a bomb-filled truck into one of the garages below there. It dates from, or dated, we should say, tragically, from 1970 when it opened. It was owned until recently by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And of course, in all of this, there is another explosion, a horrific explosion. Another airplane apparently crashed into the heart of the nation's military establishment at the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. Apparently, it hit on the south or Virginia side of that building. Of course, the whole building is in Arlington on the southern shore of the Potomac River. That aircraft hit there, and apparently 5 floors of the Pentagon have at least been partially collapsed. The Pentagon, which for many years claimed the title as the world's largest office building, and I can only imagine that today 3 of the world's largest office buildings have been decimated.
And Tyler, as you look at that live picture, the billowing smoke there, and might be able to make out that there are no longer 2 World Trade Center towers, I'd like to mention that just shortly after this happened, after the first tower collapsed, it took us, I was sitting right here on the set, it took us several minutes to actually put our arms around the fact that this building had collapsed. You know, we knew that that's what we were seeing, but at the same time, our minds were telling us that could not be possible. And yet, shortly thereafter, the second tower collapsed, and it just was mind-boggling to accept that. And that was what, shortly before 9 a.m. we're looking at 10, 11, 12, 1, 4 hours ago. So
we want to, in fact, recap everything that has happened today. Michelle Crusoe-Cabrera joins us with a look. Michelle.
Thank you very much, Martha. Here's just a basic rundown of what's happened if you're just joining us now. Terrorist attacks have taken down the World Trade Center and forced the evacuation of dozens of buildings. It could by now be perhaps hundreds of buildings across the country. The attacks happened around 9 a.m. when an American Airlines plane, reportedly hijacked from Boston, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. About 18 minutes later, that's what you're seeing there, a second plane collided into the South Tower. Moments later, the South Tower collapsed, and that was later followed by the North Tower. It was a scene of horror, as accounts from witnesses on the ground say people were seen falling and jumping from the towers to escape the smoke and the fire. American Airlines has confirmed that 2 of their flights were hijacked and crashed in today's attacks. 164 passengers and crew members were killed. And United Airlines confirms 2 of their planes crashed. One of them was a Boeing 757 carrying 90 people from Newark to San Francisco. It crashed in western Pennsylvania. The airline has not released the location of the second crash. No word if both of these are absolutely related or officially related to this wave of terrorist attacks. The White House has been evacuated. President Bush is at a safe location in Louisiana. We are waiting for a statement from him, but he gave a statement earlier on in the morning in Florida.
We have President Bush on tape. Let's listen.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our American people, that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
You have been watching some tape of President Bush from Shreveport, Louisiana, which was his second address of the day to the American people. This one happened just moments ago. He said that the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these attacks. He also said that freedom will be protected. He said that he had been in touch with members of Congress and leaders around the world. He also thanked the many folks out there who have risked their own lives in their efforts to rescue those who have been attacked on this very unbelievable day for most of us. And he also said that he asked that the nation join him in prayer for the families of those who have been injured and killed in these attacks, as well as for those who have spent the better part of this day trying to save them. And he mentioned, he said that everyone should have great resolve, that those who have been responsible will be found.
And Martha, just so there is no confusion about this, President Bush did not get into this detail, but make no mistake, the U.S. military has been placed on full wartime state of alert. That is just crossing the Dow Jones news wires. President Bush saying that the U.S. military is placed on full wartime state of alert.
We were also getting a report that employees at the headquarters of Ford Motor Company and General Motors in Detroit, or the Detroit environs, have been sent home for safety reasons. And, of course, this is true of many businesses. The entire federal government in Washington, the federal buildings in the federal city have been shut down. As you look there at a shot of the side of the Pentagon that was hit this morning by apparently a terrorist commandeered airliner. That is, earlier reports were that was American Airlines flight number 77, a Washington to Los Angeles flight with 64 aboard. Our Robert Hager of NBC News, one of the top aviation reporters going, had reported earlier that it was that aircraft, American 77, that went into the Pentagon this morning in the worst attack ever on the heart of the U.S. Military establishment. There have, of course, been other bombs that have gone off. I shouldn't say of course. There have been other bombs that have gone off at the Pentagon, just as tragically there were other bombs that went off at the U.S. At the World Trade Center in New York, that in 1993.
Tyler, joining us on the phone right now is Don Hamilton, who is in Oklahoma City. He is with the National Prevention of Terrorism group that is responsible for the Oklahoma City National Memorial. Don, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Your reactions to this horrible event that we're all witnessing today?
Well, there's an awful sadness and in a sense sameness about it. For those of us who've watched terrorism for a long time, there is this sense that all of this has happened before, but it's never happened on such a scale and in such a coordinated manner. It's as you alluded to earlier, there have been previous attacks on the Pentagon. There's a previous bombing of the World Trade Center. Airliners have been hijacked before, but we've never seen anything on this scale before.
You know, I think so many Americans have been under the impression that that there has been such a national effort within the government to prevent something like this from happening, and you work with the Prevention of Terrorism group. Does this event boggle your mind in terms of what they were able to pull off here?
It is. I can't say that I find it mind-boggling. It is an impressive degree of coordination for a terrorist group, assuming that it was not the work of a national government, but that such a thing could be done has always sort of been the nightmare scenario for people who look at and study terrorism. Very hard, all but impossible to predict, but not impossible to imagine.
Well, while we are trying to imagine how this was able to be pulled off, what are your thoughts, having studied terrorism, on where this might have come from? What kind of group? And I just want to preface this by saying we have no desire to speculate here, but we just want to sort of get our minds around what kind of concerted effort this would take.
The nature of it leads us to believe that it is a violent, well-organized group with a profound hatred of the United States, its national symbols, and the national power of the United States. It is someone who has, in his or her mind, or in the group's mind, declared war on the United States. This is terrorists commonly think of themselves not as terrorists, but as soldiers of some sort. It's sort of a silly idea, but nevertheless, that's what they believe. They obviously are dedicated to what they're doing. I wouldn't think they're crazy, but they're dedicated, they're organized, they've been patient, they've worked at this for a long time.
You know, the day of the Oklahoma City bombing, there was so much speculation out there that it was some kind of international terrorist group, and it turned out to be something that generated, of course, right within the confines of our own United States of America. You know, what about, that sort of militia kind of these planes generated in the United States?
I am not aware, and I have to tell you that while I was once in government, I no longer have access to classified information. But I try to look for, there's quite a bit of information available publicly. I'm not aware of any group in the United States, a domestic homegrown group, with anything that would resemble this kind of a capacity. So that leads me to believe that there is an international origin to this. Beyond that, it's very hard to say. I mean, there are people in the government who have to be wondering, is this the beginning of something? And they're doing their jobs. They are speculating about who might have done it and what they might do next. The rest of us can afford to sit back and wait to learn who did it, and to study what should be done about it.
In what capacity were you involved in the government? You say you're no longer privy to classified information. I'm just curious what your background is.
I was a diplomatic officer, a career diplomat for the United States for about 30 years, and did a lot of work on terrorism. I lived in countries with terrorism problems and worked in the counterterrorism office at the State Department on 2 separate occasions. So I've been watching these things for a long time, both as a a sort of a policy analyst and an occasion in Peru and in Israel, sometimes worrying about my own well-being. But the thing is, we don't need to panic here. This may be we will likely end up today, I think, with more dead than we suffered at Pearl Harbor. But there's no reason to believe that our government is not functioning, that this is a threat to our national existence, or that we can look forward to a great deal more of this. There are very few organizations in the world. I know of no organization in the world that could sustain a campaign like this. Mm-hmm. This will probably turn out to be the result of months, if not years, of planning. But the capacity to then communicate and do what's necessary to do this again and again and again probably doesn't exist. I don't think there's any reason at all for panic.
You say that you're not surprised in some ways that an attack like this was able to take place, and indeed it has been something that has, sort of been the subject of movies and sort of Armageddon kinds of tales that we've been told. But nonetheless, I go back to the fact that I think that the American people have been under the impression that there's been contacts, that the surveillance is very intense, that these kind of groups are watched quite closely by the U.S. government. How does something like this happen?
Well, the United States has long been very aggressive in collecting intelligence internationally, and in using electronic means to interdict conversations and whatnot. The people who would do this would be well aware of the formidable technical capacities of the United States to collect intelligence on something like this. They would probably take their time about it and move, perhaps even by word of mouth, among a handful of trusted people. Within the United States, we are very jealous of our civil liberties. The Federal Bureau of Investigation cannot open an investigation unless there has been a crime committed or they have reason to believe that the commission of a crime is imminent. And there's good reason for that. I mean, most of us at one time or another have stood around and said, well, the government, look what the government has done. This is the silliest thing. Somebody ought to do something about that. And we're exercising our rights as free citizens in a free country when we do that.
Do we still have you, Don? Do we still have Don Hamilton, Andy?
Mark, I want to pass on.
Well, thank you to Don Hamilton, who we seem to have lost on our phone line. Alina.
I want to pass on two pieces of information we're getting across the wires. The first is this. According to Reuters, the White House says that President Bush is to leave Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. There is no comment on the destination. I don't think anyone is surprised about that. The second piece of information is that while earlier reports said that 2 American Airlines planes crashed into the World Trade Center towers, an airline spokeswoman is now saying that all of this information was based on unconfirmed reports, and now the locations had not been determined. We do know that 2 American Airlines planes have crashed, so have 2 United Airlines planes. Yes. We are, of course, still trying to sort out all the details on that.
And here, as we look at the horror of the second crash of that plane bearing down on the South Tower earlier today, sometime shortly after 9 a.m. Phil LeBeau is in Chicago following what actions are being taken in the Chicago area, what corporations are saying, and what is going on in America's sort of second financial capital, if you will. Phil.
Well, Tyler, that second financial capital is completely shut down, and it's been closed now for at least a couple of hours. About 9:30 this morning is when both the CBOT, the Merck, all of the Chicago markets, that's when they closed down. We had a chance to talk with some of the traders as they were leaving, and at first a number of them said, we were watching what was going on in New York, and there was still a little bit of trading, and it was after the second explosion at the second World Tower, or World Trade Center, that everyone said, this is far more serious than we initially believed, and that's when a number of firms said, shut things down. I also had a chance to talk with Rick Santelli, who covers the Board of Trade for us, and he brought up an interesting point. He mentioned that about 70% of the world's cash bond market, it flows through the World Trade Center and through some of the big firms there, including, Cantor Fitzgerald and Liberty and Garvin. So for a number of the traders here, obviously, immediately their transactions were put on hold once everything started developing in New York City. As a city, outside of the financial markets here, it is a little bit eerie here in Chicago. A number of people have left. A number of buildings down in the Loop, ours right next to the Sears Tower, they evacuated. They said, get out. If you want to stay here, you can, but we're telling you, you should probably get out. And there's obviously, as there is with a number of the major cities around the country, a heightened state of awareness about what's going on and heightened security. Tyler?
Thank you very much. We should say that reports from some of the parts of the world where so much of the terrorism seems to originate are that the Taliban, which is the government or the party in control of the government in Afghanistan, which had been the country in which Osama bin Laden, who is the mastermind of some terrorism, has denied that bin Laden was involved in that. There have been reports surfacing in London in recent weeks that a possible terrorist attack was in the offing. Some people think that this is a sort of back channel sort of hearsay, but nevertheless we report it for what it is. Maria Bartiromo has been down in the lower Manhattan area all morning and is now on the deserted floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Maria.
Thanks very much, Tyler. I just walked outside again, and outside really is a sight to see at this point. As I've been telling you, the dust on the floor looks like snow. It's so tall, and the clouds and the dust and the debris around you continue to fall, even if it has alleviated quite a bit from the earlier devastation. I wanted to tell you that we know that trading has been canceled today. I am hearing from a New York Stock Exchange official that they may make an announcement about 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time today regarding trading tomorrow. Other sources are telling Dow Jones that it is likely that we probably will not see trading happening tomorrow either, that people are actually considering that the markets will stay closed tomorrow as well. So we're waiting to hear that announcement. Clearly, the area has been basically come to a halt. You go outside, and if people are standing around, it's only temporarily, because you truly can't stay outside too long because the air is filled with debris, and it's very hard to breathe, frankly. And Dick Grasso was on the microphone earlier speaking to the entire New York Stock Exchange, and he has reported that the ferries are running again if you wanted to go to Long Island or to Staten Island from downtown Manhattan. So that is an option, but most people are camped out. In fact, here, of course, it is empty, but there are some secure places down here on Wall Street, and I walked in one of them earlier, and basically you have a lot of traders and brokers pretty much just camped out, who has a white towel on his face, who has basically sitting there and lying down, sleeping. I mean, there's been real shock to everyone, obviously, and most people have chosen to just stay put, not go anywhere. And of course, other transportation aside from the ferry and some of the Long Island Railroad, I heard a minute ago, was also beginning to get back into operation. But most of the other transportation, that is cars, buses, taxis, are very hard to come by, and that's why people are just staying put. I told you about the scene outside the New York Stock Exchange earlier. It was something to see. I was actually outside and witnessed firsthand the second plane going into the second tower, and it was extraordinary to see this plane just making a hole in the tower. Everyone on the ground on Wall Street ran for their lives, including myself, frankly. Then about 10 minutes or 15 minutes later, I walked out there again, thinking that, you know, that we had seen the worst. And of course, then there was a third explosion, and that third explosion was the sound of the second tower collapsing. And at that time, when the tower collapsed, of course, there was metal being thrown and papers being thrown. In fact, just outside, I went outside and I picked up some paper from, I read it, and it was burnt off. All of the edges were burnt, and it was a Cantor Fitzgerald memo. So Cantor Fitzgerald is housed in, or was housed in, the World Trade Center on the 105th and 106th floors. They probably had other floors as well. I'm not sure, but I know they're on 105 and 106, and clearly that had come from there. So you've got debris falling and coming from the building. In fact, earlier there were witnesses who told me that they actually had seen bodies coming out of the building. We're not sure if they were jumping or if they were falling out, but clearly the situation continues as devastating as we've been reporting. Back to you.
Maria, thank you very much. Back here in Fort Lee, New Jersey, Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, which is the largest tenant in the destroyed World Trade Center complex, has declined comment on the status of its employees. It has, however, established a hotline. Morgan Stanley rented about 50 floors of that building. The hotline for people with loved ones there. There you see it, 888-883-4391. Now let's bring you up to date on the, before we go back to Washington, on some of the status of the airliners that apparently were involved in this coordinated and concerted attack. American Airlines number 77 was a Washington to Los Angeles flight. It carried some 64 individuals. American Airlines number 11 was a flight from Boston destined also to Los Angeles. It is almost certainly one of the aircraft that hit the World Trade Center in the first attack. United Airlines number 93 was a Newark departure heading for San Francisco, and that is the aircraft that apparently went down in the south area, south of Pittsburgh near Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And a fourth aircraft, which is also a United airliner, United Airlines 175, is down. There is some confusion, frankly, about whether that is the one that, it was one leaving from Boston to Los Angeles, whether that is the aircraft that hit the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. Robert Hager of NBC News had reported earlier that American Airlines number 77, the Washington to Los Angeles craft, was the one that hit the Pentagon. But there is obviously some confusion here as to which planes hit where. Hampton Pearson is in Washington with an update on what is happening in the nation's capital. Hampton?
Tyler, several things to bring you very quickly up to date. Number one, the mayor of the District of Columbia, Anthony Williams, and the governor of Virginia, Jim Gilmore, have both now declared states of emergency in their respective locality. This, of course, gives them broader powers to basically begin to manage the situation here. We had a briefing a short time ago from Admiral Quigley at the Pentagon, updating the situation there. He confirming, in fact, that yes, it was a plane that struck a portion of the Pentagon this morning. They, of course, now are heavily involved in fighting the fire and getting injured to the hospital. We're also being told that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld basically has been in a very secure location, the National Command Center, one of the more secure locations deep inside the Pentagon, basically since the outbreak of this apparent terrorist attack very early on this morning. Also, President Bush has now left Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana, for obvious security reasons. His destination and whereabouts as far as the next stop are not being disclosed. You'll recall he made a statement there on that Air Force Base a short while ago where he said, in part, freedom itself was attacked this morning. He wanted to assure the American people of the full resources of the federal government working to help victims of the attacks and to help save lives, and also giving a rather ominous warning, quote, make no mistake, the U.S. will find and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Hampton Pearson. Martha?
We're just taking a look to sort of clarify which of these planes hit where, and there is still some uncertainty about some of these. American Airlines had said that they were not confirming that the second plane that hit the Trade Center was one of theirs, so we need to sort of stay on this and give you these confirmations as they come through. We're also continuing to get information on different closures and things that are not happening around the United States today. And one of them that I might mention is that Disney World has closed all of their theme parks, and it may seem somewhat trivial as we look at the kind of devastation that we've seen, but it goes to the idea of what kind of impact this is having nationwide. We did get reports earlier that New York City school students were staying right in their schools until their teachers could figure out a safe way to get all of them home. So this has impacted not only, of course, foremost those who were right in these attacks, but people all across this nation.
The Disney parks are closed. The Seattle Space Needle is closed. Hoover Dam is closed. Kennedy Space Center is closed. Major League Baseball has canceled its entire schedule for today. We're also just learning this from one of our NBC News producers. Right now, top FBI officials are huddled in command centers in Washington and New York. They are talking to other FBI agents in the Bureau's 56 field offices. They will be, of course, coordinating with the Pentagon, CIA, and NSA.
We're going to, Elena, pick up now some footage from our sister network, MSNBC, with some live, or I guess that's earlier, taped footage of the events at the Pentagon. We also are going to listen in to a live interview.
And we started running down the steps. And
you've not been able to call your brother's cell phone, your mother as well?
My mother's over there right now.
All right, 877 Red Cross, good luck to you. And I wish, it's Jimmy, right? Your brother's Jimmy?
Yeah, his brother's name's Jimmy. Right?
Good luck to you. This is some of the kinds of stories that we've been hearing since this happened. Brian, there is so much mayhem and so much bedlam that a lot of the police and emergency response crews have only just been able to try to secure the areas, let alone deal with so many of these casualties. I've heard the term walking casualties. We're just allowing the walking casualties to go to staging areas. I've been told there are 4 different staging areas, the largest of which is over at Chelsea Piers, which is on the Hudson River, on the west side of Manhattan Island. If you want to look past me with the camera here, you can still see the immense amounts of smoke all the way down. We've been pushed about 3 different times out of locations, moved northward from that vicinity. At the very start of the day when this happened, we were right in the epicenter where the explosion was. I'm right now covered in the debris and the dust from the explosion itself. I was hit with a cloud of debris and smoke. A producer I was working with, we at first had to kick in a door to an apartment building just to escape the clouds because we couldn't breathe. And a police officer followed us in because he couldn't breathe, and a security guard followed us in because he couldn't breathe either. It was pitch black, and now it's just trying to establish whether it's safe enough to even get the crews into this epicenter to rescue those who might still be there, like Anthony's brother Jimmy. He says he can't find him. He has no idea where to even look for him. He was in the first tower. The other thing I want to tell you about is just earlier, this is a sort of an emergency route. They've cordoned it off, and they're allowing a lot of the emergency vehicles to run north and south through here. We saw a caravan of 5 trucks, all with medical supplies, coming right past us and heading down towards the epicenter. Again, the concern is getting those things in there. If you want to just pan up, I don't know if you can see past me. Let me get out of the way. Pan up to that big brown building where you can see most of the smoke. That is 7 World Trade Center. Apparently on the south side, that's the side that's not facing us, it's about halfway up. It's still burning pretty badly because it was rocked with a lot of the explosion from the force of the twin World Trade Centers when they came down. A large concern is what's going to happen with that brown building now, which is why we keep getting moved further and further north. You can see people down on the street moving towards us, even media who originally were allowed to have more free reign to report this story. We're being pushed out as well because there was some concern that there might be additional explosions, possibly other bombs. There was also some talk about gas, whether that was a gas explosion, a gas bomb, or perhaps just Con Ed's difficulties in dealing with some of the natural gas here. We're not sure yet. It's very, very difficult to get the emergency crews to give us this information because obviously they've got a very big problem on their hands, just trying to get people out of here and then, of course, deal with not only those who are still trapped, possibly, but those who are injured. Apparently down this street here, and we're on West Broadway and Worth Street. There's another staging area where some of the victims are being taken as well. Ambulances have been coming and going, and we've seen a lot of city buses. We've seen Port Authority. We've seen just about any kind of organization getting involved in this tragedy to help out. Port Authority workers serving as traffic police. We've seen New Jersey police officers and fire and rescue teams coming in as well. We've been told that every county surrounding the New York area, as well as the surrounding states, have sent in emergency crews as well. Let me hear what they're saying. What's the situation at this time? Or do we know anything more about other bombs?
Right now, we don't know anything right now.
And where are you being told to move people?
Yes, we are. I'm telling everybody because right now we're worried about the third building right now.
You're worried about which building?
Third building, which might be the American Express building.
Is it this brown building right here?
I don't know if it's the other side of the brown building right now.
And what's the concern with it? We've heard it's on fire on the other side?
Fire on the other side, which might cause the building itself to fall over and knock that building down. We also have to worry about the gas leaks and everything.
Gas leaks. Now, what about the emergency personnel who are on the scene? Are they safe? Are they still trying to tend to the wounded? Or are you getting all the emergency personnel out of the epicenter?
Basically, what you hear is what we hear also. Right now, nobody's told us anything.
And are you serving as traffic now, just trying to keep people out?
Clear people out. God forbid something happens. We don't want nobody more injuries or whatever.
Yeah. And how about your fellow officers? Do you know other fellow officers who were in there?
No, we don't. No, we don't. Right now, we're in the dark just like you are.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate it. There you go. I think that's probably best reported right from the officer's mouth. They're in the dark too, and that's what I've been hearing from almost every police officer that I've stopped to talk to. Brian, tell me anything, and they're told all I know is what I'm being told, to move people.
All right, Ashley Banfield, thank you for that live report from Lower Manhattan, just blocks away from where the explosions took place after, again, both.
That is Brian Williams of MSNBC and NBC News reporting as well. Ashley Banfield on the streets of Manhattan, where she has been since early this morning, reporting just then that police officials down in that part of Manhattan are concerned now about a third building. Apparently there is a fire in that area. The World Trade Center is on the east side of a road down there, which is known as the West Side Highway, or West Street in that part of town. And there are several other buildings that house major financial brokerage houses like American Express, Merrill Lynch, Lehman Brothers, as well as Dow Jones, that are hard by that World Trade Center, and apparently they're concerned about the integrity, as well they might be, of those buildings as well down there at this hour.
We understand that those buildings have been evacuated, but we do know that there are still people in the downtown area. Maria Bartiromo has been reporting to us from the New York Stock Exchange. So these reports coming in from MSNBC telling us that there is still some vulnerability down there. They are still concerned about gas leaks and the like. So it would cause one to wonder whether or not it makes sense for people to stay put in that area. And we do know that there are ferries now running to Staten Island and to Long Island, and possibly, I believe the ferries are now running to Jersey City as well, because I know John Bussey from the Wall Street Journal was on one of those ferries as well. So perhaps a good idea to continue to get out of Lower Manhattan.
Martha, we are getting some information, more information about a cell phone call from a passenger aboard that flight that crashed in Pittsburgh, outside Pittsburgh. This is from the Associated Press. An official says an emergency dispatcher. Let me move to it again. I'm sorry, I just lost it. An emergency dispatcher in Western Pennsylvania received a cell phone call at 9:58 this morning from a man who said he was a passenger locked in the bathroom of United Flight 93. The dispatch supervisor says the man repeatedly told officials the call was not a hoax. Apparently, this man trying to let emergency officials know what was going on. Meanwhile, in the coming days and weeks, we will begin to learn the names of so many of these victims, and we're getting some word of the first name. This according to the Associated Press, the pilot of the American Airlines plane that was hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center this morning has been identified as John Ogonowski from suburban Boston. The 52-year-old was an Air Force veteran who was at the controls of Flight 11 when it took off from Boston this morning. He leaves behind a wife and 3 daughters. His brother Jim told the radio station WBZ-AM, which is in Boston, it was a shocking loss and that the family is grieving. Of course, we will be hearing many, many more stories, similar stories in the coming days and weeks, but I wanted to pass that one along to you.
Okay, we are taking a look at the skyline from the New Jersey side of the river, and you can see that the skyline has changed dramatically today. And we want to go to Scott Cohn, who is right now in Midtown Manhattan in our bureau, who's gotten some firsthand accounts of some of today's devastation. Scott?
And Martha, just starting to gauge some of the reaction here as we all learn to grapple and deal with
with the enormity of what has happened here. Times Square, you know, is one of the most vibrant places in the world in normal times. Today, people are walking around Times Square in a daze. It's become sort of a de facto gathering place, as it has been so often in times of national import. People looking at the news accounts scrolling by on the various screens and tickers in Times Square. And amazingly, the square is got a number of people who have walked all the way uptown. Now, bear in mind, Times Square is 42nd Street in Midtown Manhattan, so about 64 blocks to the south is the World Trade Center. People that were involved in the devastation were there, maybe coming to their jobs in the morning, no place else to go, so they began walking and walking up to Times Square, then standing there and beginning to let it sink in.
I saw flames and a huge fire, so I got off the bus, and I watched people jump. There was like 10 people. I saw 10 people that jumped out of the building, and also I heard this huge explosion. And as I'm looking at the people jumping, the second plane crashed into the next building, and then I started running, and the guy in front of me got hit with a huge piece of debris, so he was on the floor bleeding and all that stuff.
We were looking at the first building, and it was in flames, and they were calling everybody out. And then we were just looking up there, and I was standing down there, and this plane came, the second one, and it was terrible.
So you saw it?
Yeah, I saw it. I saw the plane come in. It went right into the second tower. I just saw it and ran from there.
I was in the Trade Center. I was in the lobby getting stuff, and everyone just started running. And by the time I came out, there was just stuff flying, and then we went to the corner, and all these people were just falling out of that building.
There's a lot of course, dazed people and some sadness and some anger sinking in. I can tell you my personal observation. I was trying to get into Manhattan as this all happened in my car, and could smell the smoke, as everybody could. And I was pretty far to the north still. Could smell the smoke, and then suddenly the odor changed. And moments later, I heard on the radio that the first tower had collapsed. About a half an hour after that, that odor changed again, and sure enough, the second tower had collapsed. Truly an amazing situation, and the enormity is just beginning to set in.
Scott Cohn, thank you very much. Scott Cohn reporting from Midtown Manhattan on this day that the face of New York was forever scarred and the world has been changed. President Bush, his jetliner Air Force One has left Barksdale Air Force Base, destination unknown. He made a statement about an hour ago, which we carried for you on tape as we take a look at the forever changed lower Manhattan. Let's look at a timeline of today's events as they unfolded. Shortly before 9 a.m., an aircraft crashed into the North Tower at the World Trade Center in lower Manhattan. That tower is some 1,300 feet high. 50,000 workers work there, and 90,000 tourists visit that location every day. Shortly after that, 18 minutes to be precise, a second aircraft crashed into the World Trade Center there. At 9:40 a.m., another airplane, clearly hijacked, crashed into the south side of the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, the heart of the nation's military establishment and its nerve center there. Came in from the side where the heliport is. Initial reports were that it was perhaps a helicopter, but it has later been determined, evidently, that this was not a military helicopter or a military craft at all. Shortly after 10 a.m., the first World Trade Center tower collapsed, and here, as you look in a small scale there in the window, you see that second plane going in to the South Trade Center tower. Shortly after 10 a.m. as well, a United Airlines aircraft went down outside Pennsylvania. We say it was in Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, about 70 miles southeast of Pittsburgh in the Sharpsville, I believe, Shanksville area of Pennsylvania. At 10:28 a.m., the second World Trade Center building collapsed, and there you see the horrific sight. The humanity lost today in Manhattan. American Airlines Flight 11 was one of the aircraft that went down. We're not certain. We're trying to find out where and whether that was one of the planes that hit the Trade Center. It was a Boeing 767 en route from Boston to Los Angeles. Carried 81 passengers and 11 crew members. Other airliners that went down, American Airlines number 77 was a 757 flying from Washington's Dulles Airport to Los Angeles, carrying 58 passengers and 6 crew. United Airlines number 93 was apparently the third craft involved, and that is the aircraft that evidently went down in the region southeast of Pittsburgh. And the fourth aircraft, apparently United Airlines number 175 out of Newark, out of Boston, heading for Los Angeles.
We want to take you back to London for a moment, to Leslie LaRoche, who has been covering the story from Europe for us. This London was, of course, I believe, the only exchange that was actually trading when this catastrophe started to unfold, Leslie.
Martha, let me bring you up to date on what we know is that we have just gotten word that in the last half an hour or so there has been a bomb threat at the Deutsche Börse. And what we know is that they have suspended trade. That was about half an hour ago. Suspended trade over there. The DAX was down 8.5%. They've evacuated the building, evacuated the Deutsche Börse. We do not know if this is related to the American attacks, but certainly that it can't go without there being some assumptions there. We're watching that. We also know that Euronext is meeting tonight, and that is a combination, of course, the Amsterdam, the Paris, and the Brussels exchanges. They are meeting to decide whether to open for business tomorrow. Earlier, a couple of hours ago, we had heard that the DAX was going to be up and running as normal and that London will be up and running. I think all of that is under consideration right now. We won't know whether they will be up and open for business. We do know that the FTSE indeed was open when these attacks took place and began a very sharp sell-off. The FTSE closed for its average regular trading day closed down 5.7%. There were only 3 stocks in the FTSE 100 that climbed today. Two of them were in the oil sector. BP and Shell climbed, and so did BAE. That is defense systems, defense contractor. The CAC in Paris closed a very sharp 7.4% lower. I want to bring you up to date on what we know on some key personnel related to the financial markets. We know that Alan Greenspan was in Europe. He was in Switzerland. He has apparently checked out of his hotel in Basel. He was there for a BIS meeting. Paul O'Neill was scheduled to have a meeting with the finance minister Shokawa in Japan. That meeting has been canceled. We have had some official condemnation and some official comment out of Europe, out of the European Union. They have said that talking about these multiple assaults on the U.S. landmarks, they call it the worst attack on the United States since Pearl Harbor. They have vowed to stand by their ally, the United States, in their fight against terrorism. The EU External Relations Commissioner said that this is an act of war by a madman. And we also did hear from Pope John Paul II praying for the victims and praying for their families. I was talking to you just a moment ago about the oil sector and how BP had climbed. The oil markets themselves, the front month, the futures contract, the Brent crude contract, had been up 10% earlier on today. Trade was suspended for a while, and then trade came back online, and we have the front month contract up $1.60. And the reason we talk about why there's a reaction in the oil markets is because there is an assumption in the market, or there's a possibility that these attacks may involve the Middle East somehow, or terrorism in that part of the world. And if that is the case, might some response come from the United States and then get some response out of Arab nations or the oil-producing nations? So that's why you watch the oil markets for any kind of response, or even in advance of any kind of response. And I was just handed a note from the news editor here at CNBC Europe telling me that German television is reporting that all Frankfurt skyscrapers have been evacuated. Once again, that follows the bomb threat at the Deutsche Börse. We'll keep you up to date. We'll let you know what's happening as we give you the updates throughout the evening. We'll leave it there for now. Back to you, Martha.
Leslie, thank you very much. Leslie LaRoche with an update on how all of the businesses in Europe. It's amazing the magnitude when you think about all of the buildings in Frankfurt.
Yes.
In the financial area being evacuated, people being sent home. The impact of this being felt worldwide is really just unbelievable. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the business implications being felt here in the New York City area and across this nation with Darby Mullaney. Is Darby ready in New York with you? Okay, she is ready. Let's go over to you, Darby. Darby Mullaney at our Carnegie Bureau in New York.
Hi, Martha. That's right. We're in Midtown Manhattan, and what I can tell you is that the New York Stock and commodity exchanges are in complete shutdown mode. Almost all trading shut down indefinitely at this point. The only trading in New York around midday was in the interbank foreign exchange market, according to the wires, where the dollar was down in very thin conditions. Now, the New York Stock Exchange, of course, delayed the start of trade indefinitely. We have no exact word when they're going to reopen, and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission chairman says that trading in U.S. stock markets will only resume when it is practical to do so. The NASDAQ, of course, is closed as well. Trading has been halted at the New York Mercantile Exchange, the New York Board of Trade also. The Federal Reserve, however, remains open and is operating normally. A Fed spokesman said that the Fed stands ready to provide additional money to banks if needed. Now, this promise of additional money is similar to a pledge that the Fed made on the morning after the October 1987 stock market crash. That statement was given a large amount of credit for helping to restore calm to the shaken financial markets back then. Now, today, Fed Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan is taking part in a regularly scheduled meeting of the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland. The Fed spokesperson did not say whether extra security measures were being taken to protect Greenspan. However, we have learned that he's perfectly safe. But the Fed also would not say when Greenspan would be returning to Washington. Federal Reserve Vice Chairman Robert Ferguson, the #2 man at the Fed, is monitoring banking and financial market developments along with other top officials. And finally, at the Treasury Department, officials say that the regular weekly auction of the 4-week bill that was scheduled for today, that's going to be delayed until tomorrow. The Treasury Department, which is next to the White House, was evacuated after a report that a plane had crashed into the Pentagon. And Martha, I can just add that from our vantage point here in Midtown, that of course it's not just the markets that are being affected. It seems like business in New York is very slow today. The traffic is lighter than normal, and a lot of people are just kind of stuck out on the streets, listening over car radios to what's going on and keeping updated. But a lot of people, of course, not working today, and a lot of businesses shut down. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Darby. Darby Mullaney. You know, it's just amazing when you think about coming into work this morning. You know, all of these people heading into Manhattan with, of course, no idea of what this unbelievable day had in store. And Alina Cho has some more breaking news for us. Alina.
That's right. Some key information, Martha Tyler, that is coming into our newsroom now from NBC News. We've just had some confirmation. All the flight numbers and crash sites are now all confirmed either by the airlines or an FBI source. Here is what we know. American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, en route from Boston to LAX. It hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center. There, I believe you're looking at a live picture of the Pentagon. Let me see here. That is American Flight 77, a Boeing 757, en route from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles International Airport. That was the plane that hit the Pentagon there. That is confirmed by an FBI source. Let's move on now to the United flights. United Flight 93 en route from Newark to San Francisco, a 757. That is the plane that crashed in western Pennsylvania outside Pittsburgh. 38 passengers on board, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants. The last flight, United 175, en route from Boston to Los Angeles, crashed into the World Trade Center North Tower. This is confirmed by an FBI source to NBC News, but not yet by the airline. Now, this is significant. This last flight, United 175, which crashed into the North Tower because it is the... No, I'm sorry. I just want to get back and recap for you. American Flight 11 hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center. United Flight 175 hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. American Flight 77 en route from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles hit the Pentagon, and the last flight, United Flight 93 en route from Newark to San Francisco, a 757, crashed in western Pennsylvania outside Pittsburgh. So this is the first confirmation that we're getting the details of all of the flights, Tyler and Martha, and exactly where they crashed. So of course we will be monitoring this and get you more details as they come in.
All right, Alina, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alina. All righty, there are also closings around the country as a result of this, including in Las Vegas, where the Mirage Casino, the Bellagio, and some of the other casinos out there have decided to evacuate, basically close them in a security move so that they would move people out and not be an inviting target here. We've been covering some of the financial news, the dollar plunging, oil moving higher. London stocks down 5.7%, $98 billion worth of capital lost there. That was the only of the major markets trading at the time this horrible tragedy, this catastrophe took place. That's the biggest loss in London since October 19 of 1987. We do not know when trading will be resumed in the United States for any of the major markets. We await word on that, and as soon as we know, we will certainly tell you. As you see, all U.S. Financial markets are closed, and in a day that I think we will all remember, our ticker is running blood donation lines and lines for United Airlines and American Airlines information, as well as Morgan Stanley, which was the largest single tenant down in the World Trade Center.
All right, we want to go out to Los Angeles and get some reaction from
buyers aghast at the tragedy that you're witnessing there firsthand. Obviously, reverberations from today's attacks are being felt across the country, and especially here on the West Coast, home to lots of military installations and defense firms. We have a lot of buildings, federal facilities, schools, and California landmarks shutting down today. Of course, like the rest of the nation's airports, Los Angeles International is closed, with 3 of the 4 flights apparently involved in today's attacks bound for Los Angeles. LAX has become a focal point here. My colleague Jane Wells will update us later on the situation there. Meanwhile, up north in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, companies are canceling meetings, sending workers home. Main bridges in the city of San Francisco and the surrounding areas are being investigated. They're under heightened security. San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown has canceled a trip back east. He's reportedly walking the streets and urging calm. Governor Gray Davis has ordered all state buildings closed until further notice. We also know that military-related facilities like NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory have also closed and sent workers home. Meanwhile, in downtown L.A., tall buildings, including the huge library tower, the landmark here on the West Coast, have been closing down, and police both here and in San Francisco have been put on tactical alert. However, the authorities here are saying they have received no immediate threats or any reports of threats. In short, the West Coast, like much of the country today, is stunned by today's attacks. Our thoughts and prayers are with all of you on the East. Tyler and Martha, back to you.
Jerry Cobb, thank you for that report from Los Angeles. We're going to go back down to the foot of Manhattan, where Maria Bartiromo he is standing by with some fresh information as we get ready to hand it over to Bill Griffith and Sue Herrera, who will return. Maria.
Thanks very much. I just went outside. There are people beginning to walk outside, but I have to tell you, it's very, very hard to breathe out there. The air is extremely thick, and there's debris all over the place. So I came right back in, and I've been telling you about the dust on the floor that is so thick. We're waiting to hear any official announcement from Dick Grasso, the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, regarding trading tomorrow. Most people are expecting that we will not see trading tomorrow either. Of course, we've already seen the impact of certain securities around the world plunging, including the dollar. So it would be unlikely that markets would be opening in such panic. I think that the theory is that people want things to settle down. We need to get more information regarding fatalities, regarding the source of this, and then probably open. But we are going to go right now to a Pentagon briefing. I'm going to send it right back to you.
Maria, thank you very much. Let's indeed go to the Pentagon, where they are briefing reporters at the moment, as I understand it. Bill Griffith here, along with Sue Herrera. I guess this is a videotape.
Yes, it's a
of
tape
the briefing that occurred earlier.
Just a short while ago from the Pentagon. Let's listen in.
No, we're not going to it.
All right.
All right, we're not going to.
But let us bring you up to date on the events of the day. Michelle Caruso-Cabrera has put it all together for us, a little perspective on the situation. Michelle?
All right, thank you, Bill. We've got an update on the events and also on the markets as well. The nation is on high security alert today after terrorist acts brought down the World Trade Center in New York. It happened around 9 a.m. this morning when a plane crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in downtown Manhattan. About 18 minutes later, a second plane collided into the South Tower. Moments later, the South Tower collapsed, and that was followed by the collapse of the North Tower. Eyewitness accounts from the ground say people were falling and jumping from the towers. American Airlines initially said both planes that crashed into the Twin Towers were theirs, but now they aren't sure about the second plane. The airline did confirm, however, 2 of their aircraft were hijacked and crashed today. One was American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, and the other was American Airlines Flight 77 from Dulles Airport to Los Angeles. United Airlines has also confirmed 2 planes crashed today. One of them was Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco. It went down near Pittsburgh. The location of the second one, United Airlines Flight 175, has not been disclosed. No word if the United crashes were definitely a part of the terrorist attacks. The White House has been evacuated. President Bush is now aboard Air Force One, destination unknown. But earlier, he gave a statement on the situation while in Louisiana.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
A plane also crashed into the Pentagon. You can see the results there. Explosions also occurring at the State Department as well. The Capitol has been evacuated and the congressional leaders were taken to a secure location, and federal government offices in Washington are closed. All U.S. embassies and consulates have been notified to take adequate precautions, and meanwhile, all securities markets in the U.S. are closed today following the attacks. The SEC has suspended all trading, and the markets may not reopen tomorrow. There will be a conference call at 6 p.m. Eastern Time to decide, but sources close to the situation say it is unlikely that the U.S. markets reopen tomorrow. We definitely saw a reaction in the global markets as well. The FTSE closed early, down 5.7%. The DAX lower by 8%. It had been down 11%. We also know that the CAC fell 7.4%. Oil stocks have climbed overseas. Insurance stocks and bank stocks have fallen, however, as a result of the tragedy. London, Germany, Tokyo, for now, say they are going to reopen tomorrow, but all of this remains a fluid situation. Mexico and Argentina have suspended trading, and the Brazilian real fell to a new all-time low today as a result. In the treasuries, commodities, and currency markets, we have seen Treasury surge and a search for safety. Gold is up $19. This is spot gold to $290 an ounce. Last I spoke with the trader in Midtown who said he was referring all business to Europe. Oil is up about 10% where it is trading. It's not trading here in the U.S. And the U.S. dollar is down versus the yen at a 7-month low versus the euro and below the 119 level versus the yen. So definitely a reaction in overseas. And now there's also talk about what happens when the markets actually do reopen and what kind of reaction there will be.
And of course, we'll be following that throughout the day. And as we get closer to the open in Tokyo, and because it's the middle of the night there, obviously, we're going to be getting some reaction from officials in Tokyo.
Just to try and get a sense of when the markets may reopen, the chairman of the New York Board of Trade, which is a backup futures exchange based in Long Island City, New York, said that it is his opinion that he would not be able to begin trading at least until Monday at the earliest. Bear in mind that a trade occurs not just between two traders, buyer and seller, but there has to be a clearing operation that occurs, and fully 1/3 of the trading that goes on in the United States is cleared in the World Trade Center area there because of tenants like Morgan Stanley and other companies who do some of that in their back office. And as a result of this lack of infrastructure, or the uncertainty of it right now, and trying to assess exactly what shape that infrastructure is in, it's possible, at least according to the chairman of the New York Board of Trade, that we don't see trading until Monday. It's early at this point to know, but as at least we know today, no trading, probably no trading tomorrow, and we take it one day at a time from there.
Yeah, we're going to now turn to the other aspect of our coverage today. Marcy joins us now with some perspective on some of the other markets that are moving and some of the people that you've been talking to today, Marcy.
Well, as we said sort of earlier in the coverage, it's sort of a little bit difficult to talk about economic events when the building that I worked in 2 weeks ago doesn't exist anymore. I was in World Trade Center too. But nevertheless, currency markets have been moving, and of course there's been a flight out of the dollar. I've been talking to people and sort of getting a feel for what tends to happen in currency markets after that, and we've even got a professor on the line for an interview to talk a little bit about what goes on in currency markets after terrorist attacks. We have Professor David LeBlanc with the University of Colorado on the line with us to do an interview and talk a little bit about what his work that he's done as a political scientist suggests about currency markets. David, are you with us?
I am.
Hi there, David. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
I know you've done a little bit of work on the effects of terrorism in markets like Israel, Egypt, things like that. Can you tell us what your work has shown?
My work has shown, for the most part, that when markets experience unanticipated political events, whether they be assassinations, whether they be violence coming from internal or external participants, markets that exist in countries that have strong political structures, such as Israel, perhaps the United States, the currencies tend to become more volatile. They tend to depreciate, but only for a very short time, and they very rapidly recover their lost value. But after that recovery, there still is a continued period of volatility that, again, is specific, that is based, for the most part, on the belief of economic actors, currency speculators, etc.
So short-term movements, but in the long term, it tends to go back to the levels that it saw before? Absolutely. Is that what you expect out of the dollar this time?
About the dollar, I'm a little more uncertain because the state of fundamentals for the U.S. economy were not at their height of strength. So I think you might see a bit of a dip. But the question is, if we're talking about the dollar, where are people going to go? Are they going to go into the yen? Are they going to go into the euro? And I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the case. So I fully expect the dollar to rebound after a short depreciation. But again, I think we'll see a lot more volatility.
What about in stock markets? Moving away from currency markets, do we have any experience, any kind of similar situation in financial markets, any kind of political situation in the U.S. that's been similar to this, that's had an effect on the stock market?
The only two that are close would be the terrorist bombing of the World Trade Center in February of 1993 and the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963.
And what happened those times?
What happened after the Kennedy assassination was that the Dow immediately dropped by almost 3%, but the very next day it rebounded. It gained all the ground that it had lost. After the terrorist attack on, or the explosion, the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993, again, the Dow lost some. It only lost about 1/3%, but the next day it rebounded and recaptured all of its lost ground.
Wonderful, wonderful. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, my pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Marcy, we should welcome you as well as our new chief economist here. My question is, you know, all of this comes at a time when the economy here in the United States was on weak ground to begin with. We were looking at the possibility of a recession, and now essentially the United States is shut for business today. And I wonder what impact we're looking at. Obviously, we're all trying to assess this. We're looking at the human damage to begin with. But when we stand back and look at the economic impact of this, I wonder what impact you think we might see on the economy.
Well, actually, you can draw an analogy with the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. That was the last time we had a situation where the U.S. was in a weak state already, and being drawn into that conflict, a lot of economists believe made consumer confidence plunge, and it made oil prices soar. And those two things together, plunging confidence, soaring oil prices, combined to produce a pretty nasty recession in the U.S. back in the early 1990s. Now, the question is the U.S. economy in such bad shape today? I don't really think so, but certainly we would expect to see consumer confidence plunge with this sort of event.
Anytime
Absolutely.
You're seeing an interruption of commerce, that's going to have an impact.
Sure.
Marcy, thank you very much.
See you later.
I know we'll be talking to you throughout the afternoon. Great. Marcy Rosell. Let's turn now to James Phillips of the Heritage Foundation. He is an expert on terrorism. Mr. Phillips, are you with us?
Yes.
Your reaction today as to what happened and how it happened, given the protections that the U.S. seemed to have in place, but obviously they were not enough.
Well, I think the first point that should be made is that this is a fairly new technique for terrorism, and it shows that past efforts to build up security on the ground have succeeded to the point where terrorists are trying to go over the wall, so to speak, with these airline hijackings. Secondly, the fact that they could hijack 4 airliners simultaneously points to a very large organization. Thirdly, the fact that probably they have their own pilots on board, because I don't think any U.S. pilot, even if he had a gun to his head, would crash into one of these buildings, because he would know he and his passengers would be killed anyway.
Now, that's speculation. We don't know the circumstances, obviously.
That's true. But just to speculate, that suggests to me that whoever did this had several people on board each plane, and perhaps one of them was knowledgeable about the plane so that they could fly them into these buildings, because it would be fairly hard to, if you weren't a pilot, to steer them into these buildings.
Does it strike you as interesting or peculiar, or I'm not really sure what the word is, that the planes, all the planes involved were either 757s or 767s? Is there any similarity? Is there any?
Well, that tells me that the suicide pilots they had were familiar with those planes, and they had to make sure that they got those planes. Jim, this was planned long in advance. They had to coordinate which flights they were taking from what airports so that they'd all arise around the same time, because they would know that most airports would be closed down, as in fact they were. So they had to make sure that the ones they had in the air were ready to go.
Jim, if you were advising the president on a possible reaction or new ideas on defenses against terrorism, what would you tell him?
Well, I think it's time to make domestic airline travel as secure as international airline travel. It's important to note that none of these planes were international flights. They're all domestic, where the security is much easier to get through. And secondly, I think I'd look for the people that would have an interest in hitting these targets, national symbols, particularly the World Trade Center, which certain terrorists had tried to hit before. I think I would start looking for people close to that ring of terrorists that tried to hit the World Trade Center bombing in 1993.
Jim, you mentioned the fact that, in your opinion, this must be a large terrorist group. If it is a large terrorist group, and this was such a well-organized event, planned so far in advance, how did U.S. intelligence miss it?
Well, we've been very lucky in intercepting many different plots. You may remember the millennium, there were people coming across the border from Canada that were intercepted, and there were other things. So we have intercepted a lot, but you can't get everything.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, thank you. James Phillips of the Heritage Foundation, an expert on terrorism, and we'll be continuing to canvass many of them during the day as we all ask the very same questions, how this could happen. If you have yet to see it, we're going to show you some of the footage of the World Trade Center towers, the symbols truly of the lower portion of Manhattan Island, the financial district of the financial capital of the world, as it's been proclaimed, and they no longer exist. It was this morning as we were trying to keep up with all of the events as they occurred over the morning that began at roughly 8:45 Eastern Time this morning, and then for the next couple of hours continued to pop up here and there, not only in Lower Manhattan, but of course in south of Pittsburgh with the crash of a hijacked jet, and in Washington with the plane crash into the Pentagon, that we were witness to this horrifying spectacle of the Twin Towers just disintegrating to the ground. And we had heard from this structural engineer that we interviewed earlier, that once these towers had been struck by these jets, I mean, these are structures that are built mainly, of course, with steel, but with concrete. The concrete essentially was liquefied, not to that degree, but it just was very suspect in the structure. And according to him, it was only a matter of time before it came down. And of course, that is exactly what happened after the crashes.
Jennifer Lewis Hall is joining us now, and she is taking a look at the impact on oil prices for us, because, of course, oil has been one of the markets that has been traded